Chapter 1018. Tao Hanin's smile completely disappeared. He had never thought that his most comprehensive decision at the time of the emergency would not receive approval or praise from Wang Fei. Instead, she was questioning him as a woman. This subordinate does not understand Wang Fei's words. Tao Han did his best to soften his tone. According to Wang Fei's meaning, we should let this matter fester according to the intentions of the mastermind until it reaches the heavens and your majesty orders a thorough investigation. This will force the construction of the imperial mausoleum to stop, and the treasures will be left in the stone factory to be returned to someone else. Is this the conclusion that Wang Fei wants to see? Tao Hanshan's tone was as gentle as possible, but the content of his words was very sharp. Qin Yining was Pang Zhao's wife. How could he want the treasures to fall into the hands of others? Mr. Tao, please calm down. Qin Yining could tell from Tao Hanshan's words that this person was ambitious and very conceited. She comforted him, I am Wang Ye's first wife. How could I think this way? Then please advise me, Wang Fei. Tao Han stood and raised his hands. If Wang Fei does not think this way, why do you not agree with this subordinate's actions? Is some people you do not know more important than Wang Ye's safety and ambition? Qin Yining smiled and shook his head. Wang Ye's safety is naturally important. But I want to ask Mr. Tao, does Mr. Tao know about the heavy rain this year? Tao Han furrowed his brow. He felt that even Qin Yining was asking nonsense. He had an impatient expression. This subordinate naturally knows about this matter. Qin Yining said with a serious expression, it has been raining for months. The rain in the north has stopped, but the south has not improved. If this continues, there will be a famine within the year. The country has been at war for years, and the national treasury is tight. If the limited silver is used on the construction of the imperial mausoleum, what will the people do when the famine comes? Tao Han felt that Qin Yining was very laughable. This subordinate dares to ask Wang Fei, even if the court does not have the silver to send relief, what does it have to do with Wang Yi? If the imperial court doesn't provide relief and the people rebel against the imperial court and hate you, I think it's better. Qin Yining shook his head patiently. This is the opposite of Wang Ye's original intention when he started the rebellion against Beiji. The reason why Wang Yi stood up was for the peace of the world and for the common people to be able to live and work in peace and contentment. He did not want the common people to suffer under the tyranny of a tyrant. Now, if we sacrifice the people for that position, how is this different from the tyrants of the previous dynasty? Qin Yining's words left Tao Han speechless. However, he did not think that Qin Yining's idea was correct. Wang Yi is currently in an awkward position in the imperial court. Wang Fei is also aware of the difficulties involved. Now that he couldn't even protect himself, he naturally had to protect himself first. Getting those things from the stone factory was too important for Wang Yi. If this thing falls into the enemy's hands, wouldn't it be suicide? Mr. Tao's idea makes sense. However, even though those things are important, there are things in this world that are more important than treasures. Once you lose your heart for power and status, you will go further and further down the road in the future. Although our current situation is tense, it's not to the point where we have to sacrifice the common people of the entire county. As long as we are willing to think of a solution, this matter will definitely be resolved. Wang Fei says it so easily. Is it so easy to think of a solution for such a difficult situation? Tao Han couldn't help but raise his voice. He paced back and forth with his hands behind his back. This is the current situation. If we don't push the blame, and if your majesty blames us, not only will Wang Yi lose the treasure, he will also be used against us. At that time, how does Wang Fei plan to deal with Wang Yi? Solutions are thought of by humans, but there are some things that humans can't do. Qin Yining was no longer smiling. He said in a low voice, I will naturally think of a way to resolve this matter properly and will also inform Wang Yi to do it. Please, Mr. Tao, inform the 5 military camps as soon as possible to cancel the previous plan. Don't implicate the innocent common people. The order has already been given. There is no turning back now. Tao Hanshan looked at Qin Yining and could not suppress the irritation in his eyes. Wang Fei is a woman of the inner residence. It is understandable that you do not understand the matters of the previous dynasty. Wang Yi has given this subordinate full authority to handle this matter. Please, Wang Fei, trust this subordinate and do not interfere. Qin Yining narrowed her eyes slightly. Tao Hanshan's words were already very rude to her. She had been with Pang Xiao for a long time. Those subordinates who often followed Pang Xiao treated her like they treated Pang Xiao. For example, Xiaoyu, Su Weiji, Huzi, Tang Xiu, and the others. They even treated her orders as Pang Xiao's orders. She had never encountered such a person who would not listen to her advice and directly reject Pang Xiao's orders. Qin Yining couldn't help but feel angry that Tao Hanshan was being so forceful with her. Mr. Tao, I do not have any intentions of interfering in foreign affairs. Since Wang Yi is willing to give these matters to you, it means that he trusts your abilities. Tao Hanshan smiled slightly as he looked at Qin Yining. Since Wang Fei knows, this subordinate does not need to waste any more words. Qin Yining's brow furrowed and she said with a cold expression, I think that Mr. Tao's attitude towards Wang Yi would not be like this. To be honest, Wang Yi would not be like Wang Fei. Like me. Qin Yining smiled and slowly said, Mr. Tao wants to say that I am soft-hearted. Tao Hanshan looked with a smile at Qin Yining. He was not willing, but his meaning was clear. Qin Yining shook her head. Mr. Tao, I understand that Mr. Tao wants to assist Wang Yi. You are loyal to Wang Yi and think of Wang Yi in everything. But as a person, there are things to do and things not to do. There are so many people in Danfu County. If they are accused of rebellion, I fear that tens of thousands of people will be buried with them. How many people have died in the years of war? How much effort has Wang Yi put in to quell the chaos of war? It is unavoidable that there will be casualties in war, but this is not war. Wang Fei's thinking is too simple. At this critical moment, Wang Ye's most important thing is to obtain the treasure. Those things cannot fall into the hands of others. Also, Wang Yi sent troops to quell the rebellion of the people of Danfu County. How good of a merit is this? I even have a candidate for the leader of the rebellion. Tao Hanshan pointed at the youth behind Qin Yining. His gaze was like he was looking at a dead object, a useless dead object that was about to be discarded. This person gathered the people of Danfu County to attack the Yamen and then attempted an assassination. The assassination failed and he kidnapped Wang Fei. Under such dangerous circumstances, Wang Yi quelled the rebellion and brought the main culprit to justice. Your Majesty will definitely be happy. The youth felt extremely uncomfortable under Tao Hanshan's gaze. It was as if a tiger or wolf was biting his neck. The youth's entire body tensed up and he gripped the end of his bamboo stick tightly. He had a feeling that the person who gave Qin Yining the biscuits today was hostile towards him. The person in front of him was even more hostile and scheming. He seemed to be suggesting to Qin Yining that he should kill or harm him. The youth couldn't help but look at Qin Yining. The flame in his heart was burning. He was looking forward to how Qin Yining would treat him, but he was also afraid of the answer. He was afraid that Qin Yining would treat him like philanthropist Wang. Just as the youth's thoughts were racing, Qin Yining stood up and stood between the youth and Tao Hanshan. He raised his arm and brushed away Tao Hanshan's hand that was pointing at the youth. Mr. Tao. Qin Yining sternly said, I never knew that Mr. Tao didn't care about the lives of the people. Apart from being able to ignore the lives of tens of thousands of people, you also know how to frame others. Wang Fei. Those who achieve great things don't care about trifles. If we don't take advantage of such a good opportunity, Wang Yi will definitely regret it in the future. Is human life a trifling matter? How is this lowly person worthy of such treatment? It seems that Mr. Tao's way of thinking is different from mine and Wang Ye's. Tao Hanshan was even more displeased when he heard Qin Yining's resolute words. He was also anxious that he had offended Qin Yining and was afraid that she would say something to Pang Xiao. Just now, this subordinate was too anxious to escape and spoke too rashly. Tao Hanshan apologized. Wang Fei is a kind person. It is not hard to understand what you say. If this was a peaceful time, this subordinate would also agree with Wang Fei's way of thinking. But the present situation is different from a peaceful time. There are priorities. This matter concerns Wang Ye's great cause. Wang Fei, please understand. This subordinate really cannot do as Wang Fei says. Qin Yining heard Tao Hanshan mention the great cause again and said mockingly, "It seems that Mr. Tao cares very much about the great cause." Tao Hanshan's pupils contracted when he heard this. He finally realized that tonight, he had displayed his ambition too clearly in front of this woman. Wang Yi treated them differently from Wang Fei. If Wang Fei did not like it and talked about it in front of Wang Yi, what could he do? Thinking of this, a light flashed through Tao Hanshan's eyes. He then decided not to argue with Qin Yining. All right. Wang Fei has worked very hard in this period of time. Dinner has been prepared downstairs. Wang Fei, please go and rest. Wang Yi has arranged these matters for this subordinate. This subordinate will naturally take care of them. As he spoke, Tao Hanshan bowed and respectfully sent her off. Wang Fei, take care. Qin Yining saw that he could not persuade Tao Hanshan and knew that it was useless to say more. He could only save the time of arguing. He turned and called for the youth, indicating for him to follow him, and then quickly walked out of the front hall. Outside, Tao Hanshan was much more respectful. Outside the door, several scholars and guards came close and respectfully bowed to Qin Yining. Tao Hanshan ordered people to send Qin Yining to rest. The youth was also given an individual room, but the youth was not willing to leave Qin Yining's side no matter what. The guards who sent Qin Yining and the youth to the door were also in a difficult position. Qin Yining thought for a moment and then said, "You can leave. If he wants to stay, he can stay. It's not a big deal." After their escape, Qin Yining had a lot of trust in the youth. At least for now, he did not have any intention of harming her. He had been sacrificing himself to protect her. When the guards heard Qin Yining's words, they looked at each other and then left. Not long after, someone brought in hot water, clothes, and food boxes. Qin Yining used a handkerchief to wipe his face and hands with the hot water. He did not pay attention to his blood-stained clothes. The youth sat on a round-backed chair near the door. He hugged the bamboo stick and seemed to have fallen asleep. The room was so quiet that only the sound of insects could be heard outside. Chapter 10:19. Just as Qin Yining was deep in thought, Tao Hanshan returned to the main hall and sat with a dark expression at the head of the table. "Brother Tao, what's wrong?" A middle-aged strategist with a long beard carefully observed Tao Hanshan's expression and asked carefully. This person's name was Qin Jing. He was also one of Pang Xiao's strategists, but his status was not as high as Tao Hanshan's. In these years, he had always followed Tao Hanshan's lead and had become his confidant. Tao Hanshan shook his head. Seeing that he seemed to have something to say, Qin Jing turned his head and motioned for the strategists and guards to leave. When there was no one else in the room, he lowered his voice and asked, "Has Wang Fei angered Brother Tao in some way?" Hearing this, Tao Han frowned and said, Wang Fei is of noble birth. Even if there are disagreements, it is us, as subordinates, who did not handle things properly and angered Wang Fei. How can you say Wang Fei angered us? Chen Jing smiled and said, Brother Tao, there is no need to be so nervous. There are no outsiders here, only you and me brothers. What is there that cannot be said between us? If this was in the past, Tao Han would not have allowed Chen Jing to say such things in front of others. But just now, he had been greatly angered by Qin Yining and could not overstep his boundaries to vent his anger at Wang Fei. He was angry because of this matter. Hearing Chen Jing say this, he snorted, a woman's view is not enough to make a plan. Wang Yi praised her as if she was a living dragon. Now, it seems that she is a person with long hair and short knowledge. Wang Yi is such a wise person, but in the end, he is unable to resist the charms of a beauty. Chen Jing smiled and said, since ancient times, heroes have been unable to resist the charms of a beauty. What is so strange about this? If Wang Fei was just a normal woman, it would be fine. If she only had beauty and knew how to serve Wang Yi, it would be fine. The problem is that she is somewhat smart, and thinks she is smart. This kind of woman is the most difficult to deal with. If she went to speak to Wang Yi, it would affect Wang Ye's decisions. If she went to Wang Yi and said something bad about someone, Wang Yi would believe her. That's right. That's the bad part. Tao Han said, just like what happened today, in such a dangerous situation, we have to make sure that Wang Yi does the right thing. Wang Yi is devoted to the country, but your Majesty is deeply afraid of Wang Yi. Previously, when we were in Beijing, how much mistreatment did Wang Yi suffer? This is not something that only we, as subordinates, have seen. This is something that all the citizens of the capital have seen. Wang Ye's meritorious service is so great that your Majesty is afraid of him. This is an indisputable fact. In this kind of situation, you should be even more careful. You must not let your Majesty have any evidence against you. But today, Wang Fei still talked to me about original intentions and disagreed with me sending troops to quell the rebellion of the people of Danfu County. Don't you think this is laughable? Chen Jing pretended to be surprised and raised his eyebrows. Did Wang Fei say why she thinks so? Tao Han smiled coldly. She said that the people are innocent. Right now, she is only thinking about those lowly people. She doesn't think about how your Majesty will blame Wang Yi after the matter. She also doesn't care about what great things Wang Yi will do. If it were up to me, it would be fine if a woman just stayed in the inner residence and did some work. Wang Fei is a living example. She has been spoiled rotten by Wang Yi. Hearing this, Chen Jing also snorted and joked, so since ancient times, women who are too beautiful are also materials that bring disaster to the country and the people. This cannot be blamed on Wang Yi. Then how does Brother Tao plan to deal with this matter? Being asked about the key matter, Tao Hanshan's face immediately turned cold. His fingers quickly tapped on the table. The tapping sound only stopped after the time it took to brew a cup of tea. This matter can't be left to a woman. Tao Hanshan's elbow was on the small table between two round chairs. He leaned close to Chen Jing and said in a low voice, people like you and me, who are not ranked in front of Wang Yi and Wang Fei like Brother Xia and Brother Su, if we are thinking about the future, what should we care about the most? If Wang Yi does great things, you and I can at least become high officials of the court. But if Wang Yi does not do great things, I fear we will not even be able to escape. Chen Jing nodded repeatedly. Brother Tao is right. You and I are following His Highness for two reasons. Firstly, we value His Highness's character. Secondly, isn't it because of this? If we do not have any selfishness, we will become bodhisattvas. Yes, I believe that it is not just you and me. Everyone thinks the same. Wang Yi is a benevolent and righteous person. He submits to your Majesty's suspicions and is determined to resist for the sake of loyalty and righteousness. Your Highness's character is truly admirable, and it also makes you and me, his followers, even more unswervingly loyal. Hearing this, Chen Jing nodded in agreement. Tao Han then said, there are some things that Wang Yi cannot do. If we subordinates do not do them, the matter will develop in an uncontrollable direction in the end. So we must think of ways to help Wang Yi succeed. Wang Yi is focused on your Majesty right now, but if Wang Yi is forced onto that path, Wang Yi will not be able to resist. Chen Jing nodded again. He agreed with Tao Hanshan's thoughts, but hearing Tao Hanshan's words, he had a bad feeling and felt a chill run down his spine. Tao Hanshan carefully lowered his voice. Wang Fei's interference in this matter will not be of any good use.
If you want Wang Yi to agree to suppress the rebellion of the people of Danfu County and divert attention, you must give Wang Yi a reason for his approval. For example, hatred. Brother Tao, you mean? Tao Hanshan made a hand gesture by his neck. You said you want a princess consort? Chen Jing also made a hand gesture. Seeing Tao Hanshan nod, he immediately shivered and the hairs on his back stood on end. This is not appropriate, is it? Wang Fei is Wang Ye's most important person. If Wang Yi knows, even if you are thinking for Wang Yi, I fear that Wang Yi will only be furious and will not appreciate it. Tao Hanshan smiled. How many beauties are there in the world? In the future, when Wang Yi ascends to the throne, there will naturally be beauties in the world to serve him. Do you have to worry about not being able to choose someone better than the Qin clan? Also, when Wang Yi sits on the throne, many thoughts will naturally change and he will not care about the current governor. He will miss Wang Fei, but he will not take his anger out on me. When he said this, Tao Hanshan whispered a few words into Chen Jing's ear. Seeing Chen Jing nod, he continued, also, what is there to worry about? Doesn't Wang Fei have a ready-made scapegoat by her side? When Wang Yi believes that the people of Danfu County killed Wang Fei, with Wang Ye's temper and his deep affection for Wang Fei, not to mention quelling the rebellion, Wang Yi can even slaughter the entire city. At that time, it will be the best of both worlds. Chen Jing hesitated for a moment and then slowly nodded. He said, Brother Tao's words are reasonable. Then you have already decided on this method? Tao Hanshan smiled and did not immediately answer. At this time, Qin Yining's expression had changed from the initial anxiety and worry to calm. She stood and slowly walked to the window. She quietly pushed the window open a crack and carefully observed the situation in the courtyard. Today was the middle of the 7th month. A bright moon hung high in the sky and illuminated the silent courtyard. Perhaps due to the difference between men and women, there were no guards outside the courtyard she was in. There were only shadows moving in front of the courtyard door. Qin Yining found it slightly funny. She had already come to where Pang Zhao's subordinates were. Even though Tao Hanshan did not approve of her cutting, he would respect her as a Wang Fei. Why did she need to be so careful? She pushed open the door and walked into the courtyard to carefully observe the surroundings. Seeing Qin Yining go out of the door, the young man quickly followed. The courtyard was spacious. The night wind blew the strands of hair on Qin Yining's temples. She could smell the thick scent of dried blood on her body. This was also the reason why Qin Yining was on guard.
If it was Su Weiji or Xiaoyu, even if there were no servant girls, they would find a village woman to help her change clothes and wash up. However, Tao Hanshan only had someone bring a set of clothes that he didn't know where to find and a basin of hot water. Tao Hanshan did not value her enough. Qin Yining could not fall out with the people left behind by Pang Zhao. She wanted to find Meng Qin. If it was Xiaoyu, she would directly order someone to go outside and find her. But Tao Hanshan's actions and words made Qin Yining unable to trust him. But this was the signal arrow she used to contact the Qin Tian alliance. It was too eye-catching in the night sky. That red light would probably attract the guards of the manor before Meng Qin arrived. Qin Yining lowered her eyes and hesitated on what to do. Was it possible to openly find Meng Qin? Presumably, Tao Han also knew that she was the alliance head of the Qin Tian alliance. He probably wouldn't stop her from contacting the outside world. After all, Tao Han was a person who was good at currying favor. He cared more about his position in front of Wang Yi. Even if they did not agree, they were still on Pang Zhao's side. There was no need to be so guarded. Thinking of this, Qin Yining walked outside, wanting to find someone to find Meng Qin. Seeing Qin Yining walk to the door, the young man followed with his bamboo stick. Unexpectedly, the two of them had only taken 2 or 3 steps when they heard the soft sound of pebbles falling to the ground behind them. The young man reacted quickly. He abruptly turned around and unsheathed the sharp blade in his hand. But when he saw who it was, the young man's movements temporarily stopped. Qin Yining also turned around and saw a person lying on the wall in the backyard. Wasn't that Meng Qin? Qin Yining did not dare to speak for fear of attracting attention. She quickly walked in that direction. Meng Qin flipped over the mud wall and landed easily. Qin Yining hurriedly waved at Meng Qin and the young man. The courtyard was not a place for discussion. Qin Yining quickly understood and followed. The 3 of them hurriedly entered the house. Meng Qin lowered her voice and said, "Alliance head, this place is too remote." Qin Yining smiled. "Mr. Tao and I have different opinions. I think Mr. Tao wants me to calm down in a remote place. He's Wang Ye's strategist. How dare he treat you like this?" Meng Qin almost jumped up. Qin Yining smiled bitterly. "After all, I'm just a useless woman. Many people look down on women. It's not like you don't know." Meng Qin shook her head. "Aren't those who look down on women raised by mom?" Qin Yining did not want to dwell on this topic. She asked in a low voice, "How's the situation with Wang Yi?" Chapter 10:20. But Wang Yi must be anxious that Wang Fei was brought out by this little brother. He should be thinking of all ways to send people out to find you, so he has no time to deal with the situation around him. Meng Qin thought for a while, then looked disapprovingly at the youth behind Qin Yining. Even if this little brother wants to protect the princess consort, isn't it too extreme? You killed so many citizens of Danfu County. Won't the citizens blame it all on the princess consort? They don't know what your relationship with Wang Fei is. The youth hugged the bamboo stick and looked at Meng Qin. He did not speak, and his gaze did not change. Seeing Meng Qin's brows furrow, Qin Yining smiled and said, "He can't hear or speak. Maybe it's because he has lived in a secluded place for so long that he doesn't know much about the world. In the future, I'll teach him a little." Hearing this, Meng Qin did not pursue the matter. Qin Yining said, "Since that is the case, I would like to trouble you to go to Wang Yi and tell him that I am safe. This is a small matter. Previously, I was afraid that you had other plans. Since you say so, I will sneak in." "All right. Also, please explain my situation here to Wang Yi." Qin Yining told Meng Qin in detail about Tao Hanshan's deployment and the fact that his persuasion had failed. "It is not because I am under house arrest, but because Mr. Tao's actions may cause trouble. The earlier I tell Wang Yi, the better he will be prepared." "Yes." Meng Qin nodded with bright eyes. Even if Wang Fei did not pursue the matter, he would pursue it. Who did that Tao Han think he was? Just because he had a mustache, he thought he was a divine fortune teller and looked down on their alliance chief. Bah! He was not worthy. Qin Yining walked to the table. Seeing that there were no 4 treasures of the study prepared, he thought and tore off a piece of cloth from his skirt. He took out a handkerchief to wrap the rouge, eyebrow, and other things that he carried with him. Using the eyebrow, he quickly wrote a small piece of writing on the cloth. Give this to Wang Yi secretly. Let him take a look at it and decide what to do. Meng Qin nodded. Without Qin Yining's instructions, he did not look at the contents of the cloth. He simply folded it and put it away. Don't worry, Alliance Master. Alright, you can go now. Don't let them see you and get suspicious. Oh, don't worry. I've observed when they change shifts. I'll leave in a while. Meng Qin and Qin Yining bowed and said their goodbyes. Then, according to the time she had observed, she quietly snuck out again. Qin Yining stood in the corridor and carefully listened to the movements outside. After making sure that Meng Qin did not alert any guards, he let out a sigh of relief and returned to the house with the young man. After sitting down, Qin Yining could not help but shake his head in amusement. This was in front of Pang Zhao's subordinates. She actually had to act so cautiously. If she did not make a comparison, she would not have known. In the past, when everything went smoothly, it must have been Pang Zhao who instructed her behind her back. It was also because Pang Zhao had shown enough respect to her in front of his subordinates that those who often interacted with her would treat her with such respect. For example, although Tao Hanshan was one of the more capable strategists under Pang Zhao, his position was not high enough to frequently appear by Pang Zhao's side. Naturally, he did not know the details and was quite guarded against her. Qin Yining did not know whether to laugh or cry. She was put under house arrest by her own people, but Tao Hanshan was still working for Pang Zhao. He was afraid that a woman like her would carelessly interfere with Pang Zhao's important matters. She did not know whether she should be angry or not. She and the young man had been running for their lives for so long that their physical strength was greatly overdrawn. The young man had also lost a lot of blood. At this time, he was sitting on a round chair in front of the door, holding a bamboo stick with his head down. Although his eyes were open, he was already in a daze. Even though he was very tired, he forced himself not to sleep. From his tightly pursed lips, it could be seen that he was very unhappy at this time. Qin Yining shook his head in amusement. He walked in front of him and took out the medicine given by Bing Tang. He took out the medicine that the young man used and handed it to him. This time, the young man took it without hesitation and ate it. Qin Yining said, "Are you angry?" The young man naturally would not answer him. Qin Yining thought about how Tao Hanshan had said that he wanted the young man to be the scapegoat and blame the rebellion of the people of Danfu County on him. He knew why the young man was angry. At that time, the young man killed the adulterer who had malicious intentions towards him for philanthropist Wang. Instead, he was bitten back and thrown on the street. One of his arms and one of his legs were broken and he lived a life worse than a pig or a dog. The young man was a very righteous person. He was hurt and disheartened, so he wanted to muddle through and not resist. This time, wasn't Tao Hanshan's suggestion another betrayal? If Qin Yining had nodded at that time, the young man would have been betrayed a second time. This time, he would have paid a heavier price, even his life would have been lost. Qin Yining knew that the young man could not hear, but a deaf and mute person like him was extremely sensitive to other people's malicious intentions. He must have known that Tao Hanshan wanted to harm him, so he was so depressed and vigilant. Don't worry, I won't let you be wronged. If you didn't do it, I won't let you admit it. I have already thought of a solution. When we go out later, you can follow me and be my bodyguard. The young man raised his head and looked at Qin Yining. His eyes were confused, but he still nodded. Qin Yining burst out laughing. He could not hear, but he still nodded along with her. Facing such a young man, Qin Yining was glad that he couldn't hear what Tao Hanshan said just now. Otherwise, wouldn't he be so angry that he would die? Just as Qin Yining was letting his imagination run wild, the young man suddenly opened his mouth and spoke hesitantly. Shao. His voice was hoarse and his tone was stiff. It was obvious that he had not spoken for a long time. Qin Yining's eyes widened in astonishment. Were you the one who spoke just now? The young man nodded and said, Ni, Shao, Shinemo. Ni, Shao, Shinemo. You asked me what I was laughing at. Qin Yining was surprised. So you are not mute. You are also not deaf. The young man did not speak. He pursed his lips and lowered his eyes. A dimple appeared on his right cheek. Qin Yining recalled what philanthropist Wang had said. When he found the young man, he was wearing a foreign robe and straw sandals. There was also a strong smell of the sea on him. Qin Yining suddenly had an epiphany. You are a Japanese. The young man raised his eyes and looked at Qin Yining. In the end, he nodded honestly. Qin Yining slowly thought about it. Everything that philanthropist Wang said made sense. The young man was probably not deaf and mute. When he first came to this place, he had probably drifted here by accident. Being in a foreign country, he did not understand anything and did not know how to speak the local language. Of course, he could only pretend to be deaf and mute. Qin Yining slowed down. Can you hear what I said? Can you understand what I mean? The young man nodded and then shook his head. You can hear, but you can't understand everything. The young man nodded heavily again. Qin Yining said, Does philanthropist Wang know about your situation? The young man blinked and reacted for a while before he understood what Qin Yining meant. He shook his head. Qin Yining laughed. Since you can hear and speak, I will get someone to teach you the Zhou language in the future. What is your name? My name is. The young man said a string of words that Qin Yining did not understand. Qin Yining stared and said with embarrassment and hesitation, You just said that your name is. Silly cry. The young man looked at Qin Yining and thought for a while. Then, he burst into laughter. He shook his head and waved his hand repeatedly. Then, he used his left hand to write on the table. Qin Yining looked down and saw that he had written a few words. She recognized the first two words. She could not help but blush. So it's Sakurai. I don't recognize the words after that. So this word is pronounced silly cry in your country. The young man smiled and nodded. Then, he read his name again. Qin Yining was quite curious about the neon language. After reading it a few times with Sakurai, she could accurately read his name. She asked curiously, Do you know the meaning of thank you? How do you say thank you? Sakurai's reaction was slow, but she could still understand Qin Yining's meaning. She read the 4 words again. Qin Yining repeated it a few times with him. Suddenly, he smiled and read his name together with the 4 words after that. Sakurai was immediately stunned. Qin Yining smiled and said, You were seriously injured in order to save me. I will repay you in the future. Sakurai was still in a daze and did not respond. Qin Yining saw that he did not speak and did not look good. He knew that his body was still weak, so he stopped learning the neon language from him. He smiled and said, It's late. You should rest. I will also go to the inner room to sleep. Qin Yining pointed to the warm Kong by the window and motioned for Sakurai to sleep there. Then he went into the inner room. He asked Meng Qin to bring the news to Pang Xiao. He thought that Pang Xiao would be able to solve the problem of the people surrounding the government office tonight. Qin Yining relaxed a little. He and Sakurai had been on the run for 2 days. At this time, he felt tired. Qin Yining fell asleep almost as soon as he closed his eyes. Sakurai sat in the round chair in front of the door. He did not go to the warm Kong by the window to rest as he was told. Instead, he held the bamboo blade and pondered. His hearing was excellent. When he heard Chin Yining's even breathing from the inner room, Sakurai stood up and walked slowly to the floor-to-ceiling cover. He looked at the person sleeping soundly on his side in the arhat bed, and his eyes gradually became firm. He placed the bamboo blade by the wall and slowly knelt down on one knee. He lowered his head and placed his hand on his chest to perform the ritual of recognizing her as his master. He had also performed this ritual to Wang De a few years ago. However, he had just recognized her as his master when he was betrayed by Wang De. He had always been betrayed, so much so that his heart was dead. However, this woman was so beautiful. She trusted him and gave him hope. He was afraid that he would be rejected if he recognized her as his master. He also felt that he was now a disabled person with a lowly status. He was not worthy of being her follower, so he secretly performed the ritual of recognizing her as his master while she was asleep and recognized her position in his heart. As long as he recognized her as his master in his heart, it did not matter whether she recognized him or not. After Sakurai performed the ritual of recognizing her as his master, he took the bamboo blade and returned to the outer room. He did not plan to rest. He wanted to continue keeping watch for her. Unexpectedly, just as he sat down, he suddenly heard a rustling sound from the courtyard outside the door. There were also extremely light and messy footsteps. Just by listening, he could tell that there were at least 20 people. Chapter 10:21. Chin Yining had just fallen asleep when he was urgently awakened. He opened his eyes with a start, his heart beating like a drum. Sakurai's expression was anxious. She didn't know how to speak Dezhou's language, so she couldn't express herself clearly. She could only pull him up and gesture outside. Chin Yining quickly regained his clarity of mind. He hurriedly got up and followed Sakurai outside. Unexpectedly, as soon as the two of them returned to the main hall, they heard someone approaching from the other side of the door. Chin Yining's heart tightened. He was afraid that they couldn't leave through the main door. Sakurai obviously knew that the situation was urgent. She pulled Chin Yining's wrist and headed towards the back window. She hurriedly pushed open the window and urged Chin Yining to jump out through the window first. At the same time, there was a loud bang from the main door in front of them. It had been forcefully kicked open. A bean-sized lamp in the room flickered in the wind. More than 10 masked men in black holding sharp blades rushed in like a tide. They just happened to see Sakurai's back as she jumped out of the window. "Chase!" A low male voice sounded. The masked men in black quickly chased after them through the back window. Sakurai grabbed Chin Yining's wrist and ran. The masked men in black were much faster than a crippled man and a woman. They quickly caught up with Sakurai and Chin Yining and surrounded them. Chin Yining clenched his teeth. His mind was working furiously. There were so many assassins. Why didn't Tao Hanshan's men react at all? Could it be that all the guards in the manor had been knocked out? Chin Yining immediately reprimanded in a loud voice, "Who are you? Do you know who I am? If you hurt a single hair on my head, Prince Zhongshuan won't let you off." She deliberately raised her voice. She wanted to spread her voice in the dead of night so that the people outside would hear the commotion and come to her rescue. However, Chin Yining didn't get any response. Instead, the leader of the assassins snorted mockingly. "You're the one we're going to kill. Give me your life." The assassins showed their snow blades without hesitation and rushed forward. Chin Yining's heart tightened. He felt an unprecedented sense of danger. His hands and feet turned cold. She didn't have any other guards by her side. Sakurai was the only one with her. However, there were 20 assassins surrounding them. Even with such a big commotion, Tao Hanshan and the rest of the guards were not attracted. It was obvious that something had either happened to those people or there was something else going on. She didn't have time to think about it as the cold blade was already coming towards her. Qin Yining widened her eyes and quickly tried to dodge, but before she could do anything, Sakurai had already blocked in front of her, holding the bamboo blade horizontally to block with all her might. Under the moonlight, the weapons collided with a clang. At the same time, another katana came slashing at her from behind. Sakurai hurriedly used her right shoulder to push Qin Yining away, but she had no choice but to face the blade with her back. Qin Yining did not hear Sakurai's cry of pain. He watched as the assassin's knife cut open a wound on Sakurai's back. Blood gushed out, and the smell of blood instantly filled his nose. However, Sakurai didn't seem to feel any pain. He held the katana with his left hand and protected Qin Yining with his broken arm. Even though he was limping and weak, he was still extremely fast. Qin Yining only saw a flash of silver light in front of her eyes. Before she could see clearly how he moved, she heard a few muffled sounds of weapons piercing flesh. In the blink of an eye, 3 assassins in black fell to the ground, unable to get up. Sakurai forcibly tore a hole in the encirclement. He hurriedly retreated with Qin Yining while fighting. His fearless momentum and strange and fast movements when he fought with his katana were indeed quite intimidating. 3 assassins died, and the remaining 17 hesitated for a moment. Sakurai took advantage of this opportunity to escape with Qin Yining to the front gate of the courtyard. Chase after them. How could the assassins let them go? A group of people rushed forward again. This time, they knew that Sakurai was skilled in martial arts, so they used all their strength. Sakurai had to protect Qin Yining and deal with more than 10 people at the same time. The situation was really tense. However, he had no intention of abandoning Qin Yining and leaving on his own. He pursed his lips tightly and protected Qin Yining behind him. His ferocious fighting spirit and his beast-like gaze made the assassins tremble in fear. His katana technique was similar to his aura. It carried a frightening fierceness. He would rather sacrifice himself to injure the enemy. He would rather let the enemy injure him in order to take the enemy's life. The assassins relied on their numbers and came with a purpose. Naturally, they wouldn't fight with their lives on the line like Sakurai in order to protect Qin Yining. The moment they hesitated, they would immediately be caught red-handed. In just a few breaths, several more assassins fell. Sakurai's right arm protected Qin Yining as he retreated step by step. His eyes were as sharp as a fierce beast's. Blood kept dripping from the tip of his katana. The assassins seemed to be afraid of Sakurai and didn't dare to continue forward. Sakurai took advantage of the assassins' hesitation and immediately ran out of the courtyard with Qin Yining. They ran toward the front yard of the manor. Chase after them. Don't let them escape. The assassins chased after them again. As Qin Yining ran, he heard Sakurai's heavy breathing. He used today's fighting style when he ran with her. If he could fight head-on, he wouldn't dodge. He would exchange his wounds for the enemy's life. Not only that, but he also tried his best to protect Qin Yining. If he couldn't block the enemy, he would rather use his body to block the attack than let Qin Yining get hurt. He had already lost a lot of blood and was covered in wounds. Today, he had a few new wounds. The pungent smell of blood filled Qin Yining's nose. She didn't know what to feel. You should go. Their target isn't you. As Qin Yining was being carried away by Sakurai, he said, they want to kill me. There are so many assassins. You won't be able to fight them all by yourself. Sakurai didn't answer. She continued to protect Qin Yining as they fled toward the manor's main gate. She didn't care about the approaching footsteps of the assassins. Qin Yining said anxiously, they must want to kill me because I'm Wang Ye's enemy. You and I have only met by chance. If it's just for a meal, then you've already repaid the debt by risking your life to save me. Life is precious. Hurry up and leave. There's no need to die with me. No. Her tone was resolute. As soon as he finished speaking, the ear-piercing sound of weapons clashing could be heard. The assassins had arrived. They were still quite far from the manor's main gate. There were houses on both sides, and behind them was a courtyard wall. This formed a blind spot. Sakurai used her body to protect Chin Yining between three walls, forming a barrier. Due to the limited space in the alley, the assassins couldn't swarm her, which relieved a lot of the pressure. Sakurai didn't have to worry about the person behind her while she was fighting. However, there were simply too many assassins. Their martial arts skills weren't as good as Sakurai's, but they had the advantage in numbers and had the advantage in terms of physical strength. Sakurai was already injured, and after so many years of starvation and cold, his martial arts skills had dropped to 20% now. However, he still gritted his teeth and resolutely shielded Chin Yining behind him. He had the posture of a man who could hold back 10,000 men. With his ferocious strength, 2 more assassins died under his blade. 2 new wounds appeared on his shoulder and calf. Sakurai's face was pale. His chest heaved violently as he panted heavily. However, his expression was resolute, and he still refused to back down. He knew that if he fell, his master behind him wouldn't be able to survive. The assassins were also stunned by Sakurai's superb swordsmanship and ruthless aura. They hesitated for a moment, but no one dared to approach. They had a total of 20 people, and 8 of them had been killed in the blink of an eye. The remaining ones didn't dare to charge forward. They could only block the entrance to the alley to prevent anyone from escaping. Sakurai was able to hold off the remaining dozen or so masked assassins by himself for the time it took to drink a cup of tea. Chin Yining stood in the corner and looked at Sakurai's frail back. She had bitten her lower lip so hard that it was bleeding. Her gaze gradually fell on the small puddle of blood on the ground. It was Sakurai's blood. The assassins changed their strategy and decided to take turns to fight Sakurai. They planned to exhaust him to death. Although Sakurai's physical strength was gradually weakening, he still refused to back down. With his swift and fierce swordsmanship, he killed another 6 assassins in close combat. In a short time, the narrow alley was filled with the corpses of the assassins. The remaining 6 assassins didn't dare to move forward rashly. The clothes on Sakurai's body had been cut into rags, and the bloody wounds on his body were exposed. Fresh blood dripped onto the ground, but he still refused to run away. Chin Yining's eyes were bloodshot, and his heart was beating violently. Sakurai didn't understand the commoners' words and thought that they wanted to kill her. He took her out and fled with her. Now, he refused to give up on her. He was almost covered in wounds. Regardless of whether his actions would cause her misunderstandings and trouble, he was willing to give up his life to protect her. Such loyalty and affection was enough to move anyone with a conscience. Chin Yining thought in a daze. No wonder this person was called Silly Cry. He was really silly. He had his own persistence. In his heart, kindness and loyalty were more important than his life. That was why he couldn't recover after being betrayed by philanthropist Wang De. She only gave him food to eat and treated him slightly better, and he protected her with his life. Chin Yining hated that she didn't have any martial arts skills. She couldn't help it all. The only thing she could do was stay in the corner silently. She didn't want Sakurai to be distracted, and she didn't want Sakurai to bleed for nothing. She watched as Sakurai dragged a crippled arm and a crippled leg, fighting the assassins head-on. He continued to use his body to build a strong wall for her. However, this kind of self-awareness caused her to only watch as her friend was stabbed one by one. There was a flash of silver, and 2 more assassins had their throats slit. But before Sakurai could react, another assassin's sword was already in front of her. Be careful. Sakurai had lost too much blood and was already weak. Her earphones were buzzing, and the world in her eyes was blurry. She couldn't dodge in time and was stabbed in the abdomen. There was a muffled sound. Chin Yining watched as the tip of the sword pierced through Sakurai's thin back. Sakurai cut off the assassin's arm and stabbed the bamboo blade into his heart. Then, his body swayed and he slowly knelt on the ground. Blood quickly gathered at his feet. Chapter 10:22. Sakurai's thin body trembled, and blood gathered under his body. Chin Yining's pupils constricted, and his voice trembled. He said in panic, "Sakurai, Sakurai." The remaining 4 assassins saw that Chin Yining was close in front of them, and that the crippled cripple had been stabbed in the vital parts, so he was no longer a threat. They seized the opportunity and rushed forward. Sakurai pushed Chin Yining away, and with the steel sword in his abdomen, he fought against the 4 assassins. However, his vision was already blurred, and he was relying on his instincts. He was a man of his word. Since he had recognized this woman as his master, he could not watch her lose her life before his life came to an end. For the kindness she showed him, for the sincere gratitude she showed him, for the fact that she did not betray him, unfortunately, he didn't have time to ask for her name, and he didn't have time to stay by her side as her bodyguard. The 4 assassins saw that victory was in sight, and they attacked more fiercely. Sakurai was exhausted, and he couldn't resist anymore. The tip of the assassin's sword pierced his chest. The bright blade flashed in the moonlight, and then blood spurted out. Sakurai. Chin Yining rolled and crawled to Sakurai's side, and pressed his hands on his bleeding wound. He said in tears, "I'm sorry, I've implicated you." Sakurai lay on the cold ground, and his most cherished katana was finally released. He grabbed Chin Yining's wrist and squeezed out a sentence with difficulty. Name. Yining, my name is Chin." The grip on his wrist loosened. "My name is Chin Yining. Thank you for protecting me." "I'm sorry." The assassin's steel sword brought a gust of cold wind, and slashed toward him. Chin Yining raised his teary eyes, and suddenly felt tired and hopeless. She couldn't escape. Just as she closed her eyes and waited for death, she heard the sound of metal colliding. After a few whooshing sounds, the 4 assassins fell down screaming. Lowering his head, he saw that his steel saber had been knocked down by an arrow. An arrow had pierced through each of the 4 assassins' thighs, injuring their major blood vessels. Fresh blood spurted out as if it had been squeezed. Sister Yi. Pang Xiao carried a longbow on her back and was as agile as a cheetah. In the blink of an eye, she was already in front of them. However, when Pang Xiao saw Chin Yining, who was sitting in a pool of blood and covered in blood, he suddenly stopped in his tracks and was unable to approach her. "Wang Yi, what should we do with the assassins?" Tang Xiu and Jinghu Wei took down the assassins and dislocated their jaws. Su Weiji, who was out of breath from running, saw that Pang Xiao and Chin Yining's expressions were not right. He hurriedly said, "Take them away and interrogate them first. Don't let them die." "Yes." Tang Xiu immediately responded and took the assassins away. Su Weiji and Xia Yu were panting as they stood to the side. Looking at the sitting Wang Fei and standing Wang Yi, they didn't know what to do. Pang Xiao lowered his head to look at Chin Yining's hands that were still pressed against Sakurai's chest. His Adam's apple bobbed as he slowly said, "Sister Yi, you." Before Pang Xiao could finish, he suddenly stopped. Because he saw his sweetheart sobbing and sobbing, her shoulders heaving up and down. Then, her suppressed sobs turned into loud bawling. Pang Xiao felt as if his internal organs were about to be crushed. His sister Yi was a woman who was soft on the outside but strong on the inside. He had never seen her cry like this. She was as aggrieved as a child. Pang Zhao's nose was sore from her crying. His heart ached and he quickly crouched down to hug Qin Yining tightly. "It's my fault. I'm late. Don't cry. My sister Yi, don't cry." Qin Yining shook her head and grabbed Pang Zhao's shoulders. "I killed him. If it wasn't for me, he wouldn't have died. It's not your fault. You can't be blamed. This is clearly the assassin's fault. I will definitely avenge him. Be good. Don't cry, okay?" Pang Zhao comforted her gently and kissed her eyelids. His heart ached so much that he was about to go crazy. He hated that he couldn't immediately skin the culprit alive. Qin Yining buried herself in Pang Zhao's arms and cried until it was dark. Pang Zhao knelt on the ground and hugged her tightly as he comforted her. Su Weiji and Xia Yu saw this and quietly retreated to make other arrangements. Qin Yining cried until her vision turned black. Her fingers accidentally touched Pang Zhao's abdomen and she felt a warm, wet and sticky sensation. She was immediately shocked. "What's wrong with you? You're injured." "It's okay. It's just a superficial wound. I did it on purpose. If I want to put on a show, I have to go all the way. Otherwise, I still can't get rid of those ignorant people." Pang Zhao lifted his torn robe and showed it to Qin Yining. "Look, the wound isn't big. It's not deep either. I just opened my mouth because I ran too fast. It doesn't hurt at all. It'll be fine after I apply some medicine." There was a 3-inch long wound on his abdomen that was bleeding. It was impossible to tell the depth of the wound just by looking at it. Qin Yining still hadn't recovered from the fear of Sakurai's death. When she saw Pang Zhao bleeding so much, she was worried and distressed. She grabbed his sleeve and her lips trembled, but she couldn't speak. "Sister Yi, what's wrong? Don't scare me." Pang Zhao saw Qin Yining's expression become uglier and uglier. He hurriedly picked her up and ran to the nearest room. Xia Yu, Su Weiji and the others saw Wang Yi carrying Wang Fei in such a panic. They couldn't help but worriedly follow. Xia Yu turned and ordered someone to call for a doctor. Qin Yining was placed flat on the heated Kong bed by the window. She was still holding on to Pang Zhao's sleeve. She only felt that her breath was stuck in her chest. Her vision darkened and her heart palpitated. Pang Zhao squatted beside her and patted her chest to soothe her breath. "Sister Yi, take a deep breath. Calm down. It's fine. Look at me, aren't I fine now? My body is very strong. A few superficial wounds are nothing. They'll be fine after they're bandaged. Relax. Don't be anxious. Don't be nervous." Qin Yining nodded. She closed her eyes and her tears flowed out again. Pang Zhao's heart ached. He stood up and wrung a handkerchief to wipe the blood from her face and hands. He used 3 basins of hot water to barely wipe it clean. Ji Yun, Jing Zhe and the others are slightly injured. I asked someone to take them to the big tent outside the city to settle down. I'm clumsy. What's wrong with serving you? You have to tell me. Qin Yining shook her head. She finally calmed down a little. She said in a hoarse voice, "Quickly bandage your wounds." I'm fine. Pang Zhao sat sideways beside her. His large hand stroked her long hair. His hand touched a lot of blood that had coagulated on her hair. It was enough to see how much danger she had experienced. Now was not the time to ask questions. Pang Zhao comforted her. I'm really fine. I've already used the wound medicine before I came. In order to distract Qin Yining, Pang Xiao said again, "When I saw the letter you sent, I was wondering why you didn't use a pen and paper. Why did you use this method? Now I completely understand." Qin Yining looked at him questioningly. Mr. Xia and Mr. Su also thought of a way. "It was the same method as yours. I deliberately got injured in the dispute. Those commoners surrounded the yamen mainly because they wanted me to write a guarantee that I wouldn't use their Danfu County's commoners anymore. However, they hurt me. They also knew that they had made a big deal out of it. I was afraid that those who were involved would be punished. Therefore, I didn't need to persuade them. Those commoners all dispersed. We took the opportunity to take people away from the yamen. Because you told me about Tao Hanshan's emergency measures in the letter, I wanted to immediately inform Tao Hanshan to change his strategy. Who knew that my people couldn't contact Tao Hanshan? They said that the villa was empty. I felt that something was wrong, so I hurried over." Pang Xiao couldn't continue speaking. If he hadn't rushed over in time, he was afraid that he would only see a corpse. Qin Yining said slowly, "Sakurai saved me. Ji Yun and Jingzhi said that he was the poor person you saved in Danfu County." "Yes. I didn't know that he had such martial arts skills. He probably wanted to repay me for the meal. He's a very righteous person." Qin Yining told Pang Xiao about his experience in the past 2 days and the dispute between Samaritan Wang and Sakurai. "He saw that I was surrounded and wanted to save me. That's why he killed many commoners. Let's not talk about his killing. Let's talk about his motive. He had good intentions. Moreover, he had countless opportunities to leave along the way, but he didn't. After he came to this villa and met Mr. Tao, he probably felt that the atmosphere was strange. He was so seriously injured, but he insisted on keeping watch. If it wasn't for him, I wouldn't have been able to survive being surrounded by 20 assassins." Qin Yining sat up. Pang Xiao immediately hugged her shoulders and placed a large pillow behind her back to make her more comfortable. "Although he's a Japanese, he's a good person. No matter what he did in the past, for someone like me who only treated him to a few cakes, he really did his best to repay me." Qin Yining lowered her eyes. Tears hung on her eyelashes. Pang Xiao was a little jealous. He knew how shocking it was to see someone give up their life for you after going through thick and thin together. Sakurai would probably stay in Qin Yining's heart for the rest of his life. But other than these feelings, Pang Xiao was even more grateful to Sakurai. If he hadn't done his best, how could his sister Yi have escaped unscathed? Although he was a Japanese, in Pang Xiao's heart, he was a true man of courage and was worthy of respect. Moreover, he still wanted to repay him for saving his life. Now that he was no longer here, he didn't know how to repay him. Wang Yi. At this moment, Xia Yu and Su Weiji invited the doctor in. When Pang Xiao saw the doctor quickly enter, he quickly got up and moved aside. After the doctor examined Qin Yining, he said in a trembling voice, "Wang Fei's body is fine. It's just that she's too tired and her emotions are too emotional. This old man will write 2 prescriptions to calm her nerves. Wang Fei will be fine after taking them and resting for 2 days." Pang Xiao quietly let out a sigh of relief and nodded, "Thank you for your trouble. We don't dare. Xia Yu and Su Weiji smiled and asked the doctor to go to the side room to write the prescriptions. Qin Yining said, "Wang Yi is also injured. Doctor, please take a look at him." Pang Xiao looked at Qin Yining dotingly and immediately cooperated to check the wound. He changed the dressing and bandaged it again. After the doctor left, Tang Xiu's interrogation also came to an end. Chapter 1023. It really is Tao Hanshan. Pang Xiao lowered her eyes and clenched her fists so tightly that her knuckles turned white. I couldn't find him when I wanted to instruct him to do something, so I knew there was something wrong with him. I didn't expect it to be true. He has been by my side for many years. Although he is a bit utilitarian, I didn't expect him to do such a thing. Qin Yining leaned against the pillow, her eyes burning with anger. She slowly sat up straight. Because I don't agree with his way of doing things, and you love me very much, he was worried that I would block his way. It's understandable that he wants to climb up the social ladder, but it's really despicable to do anything. How can a normal person achieve his goal at the cost of the lives of all the people in Danfu County? Pang Xiao's face was very gloomy. The reason why he escaped first must be because he knew that I escaped from the siege in the city. Qin Yining's eyes were filled with the scene of Sakurai standing in front of her to protect her with her life, and the serious expression on Sakurai's face when she asked her name after falling down. At this moment, she wanted to freeze Tao Hanshan and cut him alive to vent her anger. Good, he's really a good person. He thinks that my soft-heartedness will affect your success. Get rid of me and then frame Sakurai. Based on how much you value me, you will definitely be filled with hatred for the people of Danfu County. It's possible that you will do anything for revenge. He really didn't leave anything out. He calculated both you and me, and even the people of Danfu County. Qin Yining sneered and looked up at Pang Xiao. He really is a capable strategist by your side. He knows you very well and has high expectations for you. Pang Xiao was smart enough to know what Tao Hanshan was thinking. It wasn't easy to earn the merit of being promoted to the top. Many subordinates followed Pang Xiao because they hoped that one day he could achieve great things, and they could also get a share of the benefits. Pang Xiao didn't dislike such a utilitarian person, but he didn't expect that Tao Hanshan would do anything to succeed. He didn't even hesitate to kill his wife. He wasn't loyal to him at all, he was just using him. Pang Xiao felt as if her heart was being roasted by a soldering iron when she thought about how she had given Qin Yining to such a person and how she had almost lost her life. We can't let this person off lightly. Pang Xiao ordered Tang Xiu in a deep voice, immediately arrange for someone to investigate in secret. Remember, don't alert the enemy. Yes. Tang Xiu bowed. Pang Xiao added, also, we need to keep an eye on the people who used to work for Tao Hanshan. Tao Hanshan might seek refuge with these people. I understand. But how does Wang Yi intend to deal with Mr. Tao? Pang Xiao sneered and did not answer. However, looking at Pang Xiao's smile, Tang Xiu inexplicably shuddered. Since he had done such a thing, he had to be mentally prepared to be torn to pieces by Wang Yi. Tang Xiu did as she was told. When there were only the two of them left in the room, Pang Xiao said, "You must be tired. Rest for a while, we'll go to the barracks outside the city later." Qin Yining was indeed very tired at this time. However, with so many things happening, Qin Yining's thoughts were in a mess. Her mind was filled with the scene before Sakurai's death. How could she sleep? Qin Yining rubbed her forehead tiredly and leaned against the soft and comfortable pillow, saying, I can't sleep anyway. Why don't we discuss what to do next? Tao Hanshan has contacted the people from the 5 Armies barracks. The 5 Armies barracks is not very far from here, so they should be here tomorrow or the day after. When the time comes, are we going to watch them slaughter the people of Danfu County? Pang Xiao shook her head, Sister Yi, I've been thinking about this on the way here. I also wanted to discuss it with you. Since you don't want to sleep now, why don't you listen to my opinion? Qin Yining nodded. Under the light, her eyes were extremely gentle. When Pang Xiao met her eyes that were as calm as water, his restless heart was able to calm down. The words that he had been hesitant to say were now easily blurted out. Sister Yi, if I say that I may not be able to get the treasure, will you blame me? Qin Yining stared at the man in front of her. Her heart suddenly felt like it was filled with something warm and soft. In the note she wrote to Pang Xiao, she only stated the current situation and did not express her own thoughts. However, Pang Xiao's thoughts were obviously the same as hers. Like her, he was willing to fall into Magistrate Chang's trap. Considering the empty state treasury and the disaster this year, he wanted to leave a way out for the people. This time, when they were besieged by the people in Danfu County, once the cause and effect were told, Li Qitian, who cherished his reputation, would naturally stop the construction for the sake of his reputation. He would settle the matter here first before making a decision. At that time, the famine would have already arrived. The money left over from delaying time could be used to save the people from the disaster. Pang Xiao's thoughts were the same as hers. He did not want the people of Danfu County to take the blame. Seeing that Qin Yining was only looking at him without saying anything, Pang Xiao was a bit nervous. Sister Yi, I know the treasure is important, but for me, I have a clear conscience. I don't want to pave the way with the blood of ordinary people. If I have to sacrifice my conscience for the sake of the treasure, then the treasure is not a good thing. At this point, Pang Xiao smiled. Besides, the treasure is just icing on the cake. Who says that I will definitely lose if I don't have the treasure? A faint smile appeared on Qin Yining's lips. You're right. Some bottom lines cannot be crossed. If you do, you will easily forgive yourself if you do evil in the future. In the end, you will have no bottom line. I support your decision. However, you have to think about how to tell Mr. Xia and Mr. Su about this. The main reason I argued with Mr. Tao was because of this. You saw Mr. Tao's later thoughts. If your strategists think the same way as Mr. Tao, if you insist on doing things your own way, it is very likely that these people will rebel. Pang Xiao nodded. Don't worry. There are not many people who know about the treasure. I will carefully discuss it with them. Qin Yining nodded and got off the bed. Pang Xiao said worriedly, Why are you up? You should rest for a while. Qin Yining shook his head. I can't sleep. I want to see Sakurai. Pang Xiao immediately frowned. What is there to see? Don't look. I have already instructed people to prepare the coffin. Qin Yining pursed his lips. How can you just prepare the coffin? Natsuki, I want to send him back to his hometown. There must be a reason why he developed such a character. He was so loyal, but after being betrayed by philanthropist Wang, he fell into such a situation and did not resist. I want to know the reason behind this. I met him by chance, and he sacrificed his life for me. It is reasonable for me to send him back to his hometown. Besides, he would not have crossed the ocean to come here for no reason. I want to know what he went through and whether he has a family. If he has a family, I should take care of them. Pang Xiao sighed and said, What you said makes sense. Then I will arrange for people. Chapter 1024. Pang Xiao lowered his eyes. If Sakurai hadn't stood firmly in front of Qin Yining, he would have seen Qin Yining's corpse by the time he arrived. Moreover, the person who did such a terrible thing was one of his trusted subordinates. Actually, even if you didn't mention it, I still wanted to do something for Sakurai. A drop of water should be repaid with a gushing spring. He sacrificed his life to save you. Who can forget this kindness? You and I can't forget it. It's just that. Pang Xiao sighed. You don't want to leave this matter to my subordinates. Is it because Mr. Tao has a lot to say about you? Qin Yining's long eyelashes fluttered. She didn't expect Pang Xiao to be so sensitive. He was sharp enough to catch the little bit of grievance in her heart. It's not as serious as you say. Qin Yining smiled bitterly and leaned on Pang Xiao's shoulder tiredly. Her voice was as soft as a small animal that had been wronged. Although Mr. Tao's actions were unexpected, it's not too difficult to accept. Isn't it normal to make plans for yourself and do anything to fight for fame and fortune? I'm just a little surprised that I've become someone like Dodgy and Bao Si in the eyes of your strategists. She and Pang Xiao had gone through thick and thin together. They had gone through fire and water together. She had come up with many ideas for him and taken many risks. In the end, she had been cursed and made people want to kill her to get rid of the hidden danger. It was impossible to say that she didn't feel anything, but she couldn't say that she felt wronged. I can understand their thoughts, but his actions have harmed innocent lives. He even wants all the people in Danfu County to be stepping stones to pave the way for him. This kind of person, I'm really. She paused. Qin Yining seemed to be worried about something and didn't finish her sentence. Pang Xiao sighed softly and pressed his lips against her forehead. I know you're wronged. In the end, it's my fault. I didn't let my subordinates understand your importance. It's not your fault. Qin Yining shook his head. In their eyes, I'm exactly the same as an ordinary noble lady. It's indeed a taboo for a woman who stays in the house to meddle too much in the affairs of others. However, since ancient times, the power of pillow talk should not be underestimated. It's only normal for them to be wary. Pillow talk. Pang Xiao drawled. Sister Yi is right. Pillow talk is indeed very powerful. Qin Yining thought of something and her cheeks flushed red. She looked much better and rolled her eyes at Pang Xiao. You can still joke at a time like this. Pang Xiao hugged her slender waist and shook it gently. Okay, it's my fault. But pillow talk will always work with me. Qin Yining leaned on the Pang Xiao quietly and nodded tiredly. After a moment, Qin Yining adjusted his mood and said seriously, I'm fine now. We can't stay here for long. Why don't we head back to the barracks first? Pang Xiao looked hesitantly at the bloodstains on Qin Yining's body. Qin Yining followed Pang Xiao's gaze and looked down at himself. It's okay. It won't be too late to take care of it when we get back to the barracks. If the people from the 5th Military Barracks arrive too quickly and we're not prepared, we won't be able to protect the people of Danfu County. The two of them had already agreed on this. Now that Qin Yining was speechless, Pang Xiao naturally did not want to delay any longer and gave the order. Pang Xiao and Qin Yining left the city that very night after taking the necessary people and leaving a few people to deal with the aftermath in the villa. After such a big commotion in the city, the guards at the city gates naturally did not dare to stop Pang Xiao and allowed them to return to the barracks without any obstruction. Qin Yining corrected himself while Pang Xiao went to look for Xiaoyu and Su Weiji and told them his idea. Xiaoyu and Su Weiji were silent when they heard this. After all, the treasure was a large sum. Yu Qiyan, Li Qitian, Yu Qishujia, Lu Heng, and the others were so passionate about it. If this large sum of treasure did not fall into their hands, it might fall into the hands of the enemy. If that happened, it would not be a good thing for Pang Xiao. But after listening to Pang Xiao's detailed analysis, the two of them could not help but admire Pang Xiao. After thinking carefully, they both nodded. Pang Xiao secretly let out a sigh of relief. Many of his subordinates also followed him because they saw him as someone they could rely on to achieve rapid success in the future. If they gave up on the treasure and did not pursue the responsibility of the people of Danfu County, they would expose the injustice that the people had suffered. If that happened, the treasure would very likely be taken away by the enemy. At that time, they would be in a weak position. This logic was obvious. With Xiaoyu and Su Weiji's intelligence, they would not fail to understand. However, they agreed without hesitation and expressed their support. This was enough to prove that the two of them had upright characters. They were completely different from Tao Hanshan, who was eager for quick success. Since they had already made the decision, in their current situation, they had to rethink many of their plans. Xiaoyu asked after a moment, since that is the case, we have to think of a way to pacify the soldiers of the 5 barracks who rushed over to quell the chaos. If they rush over and end up with nothing in the end, your majesty may ask about it. When that time comes, how to pacify the people and how to respond to your majesty's side. It is best to prepare in advance. Su Weiji nodded in agreement. The two of them were not disappointed by Pang Zhao's decision. They even thought about the countermeasures more carefully than before. In the end, they discussed Magistrate Qing. In that case, Magistrate Qing really is a good official who wholeheartedly serves the country. Isn't that so? In order to carry out his plan, he did not hesitate to let the Wang Fei and many passers-by die with him. How can such a person be a simple good official? He is just a person who is good at judging the situation and hiding his true self. Pang Zhao thought for a moment. The three of them looked at each other and suddenly could not help but laugh. Looking at it this way, we are very stupid. We did not think about how the people would live after the natural and man-made disasters. Magistrate Qing did it. Su Weiji sighed. Xiaoyu said, actually, this isn't the most important thing. Before Magistrate Qing came up with this plan, he was already mentally prepared to lose his life. Pang Zhao nodded in understanding. Now it seemed that Magistrate Qing did not care about trifles when he wanted to achieve big things. He would even sacrifice some people to achieve his goal. At the critical moment, he was a person who could even sacrifice himself. Needless to say, half of Magistrate Cheng's plan had been realized. His plan had included Magistrate Qing as well. Your Majesty values the matter of the Imperial Mausoleum so much that he caused such chaos under Magistrate Cheng's rule. When he is angry, you can imagine the consequences of Magistrate Qing. Pang Zhao said, however, since he had the courage to delay the construction of the Imperial Mausoleum with his own life, I think he has already disregarded life and death. He doesn't care how your Majesty will punish him. From Wang Ye's words, it seems that he somewhat agrees with Magistrate Cheng's actions. Xiaoyu raised her eyebrows. Pang Zhao shook his head. I don't agree. He does things too subjectively. However, I can only admire him for thinking about the people. Su Weiji sighed. Wang Yi actually has the same goal as him. It's just that their methods are different. For the sake of the people, Wang Yi would rather sacrifice the opportunity to get the treasure. Pang Zhao shook his head with a serious expression. His sacrifice will be greater. Chapter 1025. Speak of the Devil. The Yamen was surrounded by the people for a long time, but the county magistrate didn't show up. Now he's finally here. Xiaoyu sneered and looked at Pang Zhao with interest. How does Wang Yi plan to deal with this person? Pang Zhao narrowed his eyes and stroked his lower lip with his finger. He smiled faintly and said slowly, there's only one reason why he wants to see me now, and that's to ask for forgiveness. If I forgive him easily, won't people pee on my neck in the future? Su Weiji was amused by Pang Zhao's words. He shook his head and said, Wang Yi agreed with him just now. His idea is good. We can't deny that his original intention was to stand on the side of righteousness. But he schemed against this king and even wanted to sacrifice the people of Danfu County. His way of doing things is too extreme. Pang Zhao said to Tang Xiu, tell County Magistrate Qing that this king is seriously injured and the doctor is treating him. His condition is not optimistic. Please ask County Magistrate Qing to go back. Tang Xiu looked at Wang Yi, who looked healthy and confident when he said that he was seriously injured. She couldn't help but laugh. Yes, I'll go right away. It was already early in the morning. It was quiet outside the temporary camp where Wang Ye's honor guards were stationed. The white tents were arranged in picturesque disorder. The torches were swaying in the night wind. Occasionally, the sound of fluttering flags and the uniform footsteps of the patrolling soldiers could be heard. The guards were on guard every 5 and 10 steps. Everything seemed to be in order. County Magistrate Ching stood in front of the camp with his hands clasped behind his back. He couldn't help but nod secretly. One could see the whole leopard from a single spot. From what he saw in front of him, he knew that Prince Zhongshuan's ability to manage the army was not unfounded. "Sir," Private Advisor Lu whispered nervously, "do you think Prince Zhongshuan will?" Private Advisor Lu seemed to feel that his words were inauspicious. He quickly swallowed the second half of his sentence and changed the topic. "Everyone says that Prince Zhongshuan is magnanimous and magnanimous. This is not Your Excellency's fault. Your Excellency will be safe and sound." County Magistrate Ching smiled and waved his hand. He stroked his beard and said calmly, "Haolin, you don't have to console me. Ever since I started this plan, I never thought that there would be a way out." Private Advisor Lu was so shocked that he broke out in a cold sweat. He lowered his voice and said anxiously, "Your Excellency, please don't say that." County Magistrate Ching waved his hand to interrupt Private Advisor Lu's comforting words. He looked up at the bright morning star in the sky and said, "When I first used Brother Wang's plan, I already expected this day to come. Fortunately, this matter has been blown out of proportion and will soon reach the ears of the heavens. No matter how much His Majesty cares about the Imperial Mausoleum, he still has to consider his own words." Private Advisor Lu smiled bitterly. "Your Excellency, is this really worth it? Moreover, the situation in the county is too big now. Prince Zhongshuan was stabbed by the people and the situation is still unknown. Your Majesty will definitely blame us. At the very least, you will be punished. Even your family will be. At the very least, all the people who were present that day will be charged with the crime of rebellion. Even so, what's the harm?" County Magistrate Ching said sternly. "Even if all the people in the county can't escape punishment, the Imperial Mausoleum can't be built. It's already the 16th of July. In my opinion, in less than 3 months, a famine will break out in the country. When that time comes, the money spent on the Imperial Mausoleum will be used to stabilize the country and achieve my goal." County Magistrate Ching looked back at Private Advisor Lu. His eyes were shining with an indescribable fanaticism and persistence. "Compared to the great country, so what if all the people in a small county die?" Private Advisor Lu was speechless when he heard this. He looked at County Magistrate Cheng's bewitching confidence. Although he felt hot blood flowing through his heart, he also felt uneasy for a moment. He hoped that everything would go as he wished. At this moment, there was a sound of footsteps approaching quickly from the camp. Then, a handsome young man in military uniform came forward. He cupped his hands and said, "County Magistrate Ching, Wang Ye's injury is critical. The accompanying doctor is treating him. It's really chaotic inside. It's not convenient to see you now. Please go back and rest." County Magistrate Ching was stunned when he heard this. He frowned worriedly and asked, "Where is Wang Ye's injury? Is it serious?" Tang Xiu frowned and shook her head with a bitter smile. "It's really hard to say. But thinking about it, Wang Yi has been on the battlefield for so many years. He'll definitely be able to get through this crisis." There was a deep meaning in her words. He was a hero who had fought on the battlefield for many years, but this time, he was assassinated by the people he was protecting. Moreover, the situation was critical. If something really happened to the prince, even if he could succeed, it would be a pity. There was a flash of guilt in County Magistrate Cheng's heart. Then, he knelt down in the direction of the main tent in the camp and saluted. I didn't manage my subordinates well and made such a big mistake. It's my fault. Please punish me, Wang Yi. Seeing this, Private Advisor Lu had to kneel down as well. Tang Xiu shook her head. Sir, why do you have to do this? Please go back. County Magistrate Qing didn't listen to her. He still knelt in the same place and looked in the direction of the main tent with guilt in his eyes. He seemed to be waiting for Pang Zhao's mercy. Seeing County Magistrate Qing like this, Tang Xiu had to go back into the camp. Private Advisor Lu was worried when he saw that County Magistrate Qing had gone far away. He lowered his voice and said, Sir, this is bad. I don't know if Prince Zhongshuan is serious. What if something happens? County Magistrate Qing sighed. Fortunately, the enemy has been eliminated. There's still Duke Dinghua in the imperial court. My whole family and tens of thousands of people in Danfu County are willing to sacrifice their lives. We don't need this valiant general. Private Advisor Lu widened his eyes as if he couldn't believe that County Magistrate Qing had said such cruel words. County Magistrate Qing could hear Private Advisor Lu's rapid breathing. He couldn't help but turn around and smile. I'm doing this for the stability of the entire nation. I only hope that Your Majesty can stop the construction of the Imperial Mausoleum and leave money for the people. Even if I die, it will be a worthy death. Private Advisor Lu lowered his eyes. After thinking for a moment, he slowly got up and quietly left. Then he strode away. County Magistrate Qing heard Private Advisor Lu's footsteps but didn't say anything to stop him. He also didn't turn around. He just closed his eyes with a faint smile and let him go. Pang Xiao received Tang Xiu's report. He pondered for a moment and said, If he wants to kneel, let him be. The men from the 5th military camp will be here in the blink of an eye. There are other urgent matters to attend to. At this moment, a Jinghu Wei came into the tent. He was the one that Pang Xiao had left in the field to deal with the aftermath. Wang Yi, we found a letter in Mr. Tao's bedroom in the field. Pang Xiao narrowed his long, narrow eyes. There seemed to be frost condensing in his eyes. Tang Xiu opened the letter. Pang Xiao opened it and suddenly sneered. He crushed the letter and threw it on the ground. Although his face was calm, his violently heaving chest and his tightly clenched fists revealed his anger. Xia Yu and Su Weiji looked at each other worriedly. Wang Yi, what did Tao Hanshan write that made Wang Yi so angry? Pang Xiao just remembered that someone beside him wanted to read the letter, but he destroyed it in a fit of anger. This king is too angry. The general meaning of what he wrote was, although I can't follow Wang Yi, I'll do my best for Wang Yi's imperial ambitions from afar. Why didn't I see that he was so ambitious before? Chapter 1026. But understanding didn't mean agreement. I can only say that everyone has their own ambitions. Su Weiji sighed deeply. Xia Yu also shook her head. She had once worked with Pang Xiao and fought side by side with him. It would be a lie to say that she didn't have any regrets. But as Su Weiji said, everyone has their own ambitions, so there was no need to be tangled up in this. From the looks of it, even though Tao Hanshan left Wang Yi's side, he still wants to continue doing something for Wang Yi. Or... Xia Yu paused for a moment and smiled bitterly, perhaps this old one's description is not accurate. Even though he left Wang Yi's side, he still wants to do something for Wang Yi's imperial ambitions. Only by pushing Pang Xiao to that position could he change his allegiance. Wasn't this the case for the founding nobles of the previous dynasties? Pang Xiao sneered, the merit of helping the emperor rise to power. But why does Tao Hanshan think that this king will continue to trust him after he kills this king's first wife? Pang Xiao stood up abruptly and suppressed his anger. This king knows what he's thinking. This king will acquiesce to whatever he wants as long as it's not too much. But he thinks that he's infallible and wants to kill this king's wife and push the blame onto someone else, forcing this king to do what he wants. What difference does he have from this king's enemies? What he wants isn't someone who can be loyal to him, nor does he want the merit of helping the emperor rise to power. What he wants is a puppet who can be manipulated by him. Xia Yu and Su Weiji stood up. Wang Yi, please calm down. As strategists, they couldn't help but have some expectations. However, they knew their limits and bottom line. They also knew where Wang Yi's bottom line was. Pang Xiao realized that his anger would affect Xia Yu and Su Weiji, so he suppressed his anger and said, "Gentlemen, please don't worry. This king has no other intentions. It's just that Sister Yi was almost killed this time. Although she didn't die, she saw someone die in front of her to protect her. This is very harmful to her. Princess Consort is a person who values friendship. This old man has also heard of that young man's matter. Wang Yi should try to console Princess Consort more. That's right. That young man's coffin has already been collected. Wang Yi should ask the princess consort about how to bury him." When Pang Xiao thought about how Qin Yining would cry over this, his heart ached. He said helplessly, "Gentlemen, don't worry. I will persuade Sister Yi." When Pang Xiao returned to the tent, Qin Yining was sleeping soundly. In her sleep, her brows were tightly furrowed, her body curled into a ball like a frightened animal. His heart ached. Pang Xiao felt pain and pity. He silently went to the wooden bed and gently sat down. The bed made a soft sound. The original sound was not obvious, but Qin Yining still woke up and opened her eyes. Her hoarse voice was slightly panicked. "Who is it?" "It's me." "Be good, don't be afraid." Pang Xiao saw her great reaction and hurriedly hugged her. He gently kissed her cheeks and forehead. "Don't be afraid. Did I wake you?" Qin Yining smelled the familiar scent on Pang Xiao's body and her heart relaxed slightly. Only then did she feel her heart beating wildly in her chest. She was a little uncomfortable. Perhaps it was because she had been running around these days and was frightened, so she hadn't had a good rest. Pang Xiao took off his boots and outer robe. He wore a snow-white undershirt and silk pants and climbed onto the bed. He lay down behind her and hugged her tightly. Her body was soft and her body temperature was low. Even after sleeping for so long, her hands and feet were still cold. Pang Xiao's heart ached as he held her soft little hand with his big hand. He used his legs to hold her cold feet and used his body temperature to warm her. "Be good, sleep. Have a good sleep. I will take care of everything." Qin Yining turned over and buried her face in Pang Xiao's arms. She mumbled, "Okay." Pang Xiao kissed Qin Yining's forehead. He pulled the quilt and wrapped Qin Yining tightly. After a deep sleep, Pang Xiao woke up early the next morning as usual. However, he didn't wake Qin Yining up. He remained motionless and hugged her quietly. Qin Yining didn't sleep well last night. She woke up a few times, but she wasn't completely awake. Every time she gasped and opened her eyes, Pang Xiao would wake up and hug her to coax her to sleep. She didn't fall asleep until dawn. Pang Xiao naturally didn't want to wake her up. He was afraid of waking her up, so he simply hugged her and thought about the current situation and how to deal with it. Su Weiji and Xia Yu woke up early. Tang Xiao saw that Wang Ye's tent wasn't moving, so she didn't dare to disturb them. She went to ask the two gentlemen if she had any questions. "That county magistrate Cheng is still kneeling outside the camp. Gentlemen, what do you think we should do?" Although the county magistrate was small, he was still an official of the imperial court. No matter how big Wang Ye was, how many pairs of eyes were watching him. Wang Ye was magnanimous in his actions, but Tang Xiu was worried that he would be manipulated by others because of this matter and be sued for abusing his personal power to punish an official of the imperial court. Su Weiji thought for a while and said, "That county magistrate Cheng is an interesting person. His actions are very interesting. You don't have to worry. Wang Yi will naturally make a decision." Knowing that this was Pang Zhao's arrangement, Tang Xiu felt relieved and didn't dwell on this matter anymore. County Magistrate Cheng was kneeling outside the camp. There were people walking back and forth in the camp. Naturally, they could see him, but no one came forward. The camp wasn't far from Danfu County's city gate. One could vaguely see the outline of the city gate. Something big had happened in the city yesterday. Although the people were afraid of trouble and wanted to hide, the three great clans of the county were also worried about the situation outside. In the end, they still arranged for people to come out and find out. From afar, they saw the person kneeling outside the camp. County Magistrate Cheng was considered to have a reputation in the area. Now that Wang Yi was stabbed and the county magistrate was punished to kneel outside Wang Ye's temporary camp, the news quickly spread throughout Danfu County. The patriarchs of the Lu, Yuan, and Yu clans gathered nervously in a corner to discuss countermeasures. What should we do? Yesterday, I don't know which family's descendant was careless and actually injured Prince Zhongshuan. Prince Zhongshuan is your Majesty's favorite. If something really happened, what should we do? If that happens, we might be accused of treason. Everyone in our family will die. Brother Lu, don't be anxious. The patriarch of the Yuan clan patted the patriarch of the Lu clan comfortingly. He then stroked his white beard. Although Wang Ye's situation is dangerous, there is a saying that the law cannot punish the majority. In the end, we shouldn't be blamed for anything. The difficult thing is that we didn't succeed in our request. Your Majesty will definitely come here to recruit people to work for the Imperial Mausoleum. At that time, won't the younger generation in our clans continue to suffer? Everyone sighed in unison. They didn't succeed in their request. They didn't achieve their goal. They even injured Wang Yi. Even the county magistrate was punished to kneel. They didn't know what they would have to face. When they thought of this, the patriarchs of the three clans felt their scalps go numb. Chapter 10:27. Just as the three patriarchs and elders were racking their brains to come up with a countermeasure, the sound of hurried footsteps suddenly came from outside. A tall and sturdy young man rushed in, panting as he held onto the door frame. He didn't even bother to salute as he anxiously pointed in the direction of the outskirts of the city. Oh, no. The army, there's an army coming. What? The three patriarchs turned pale with fright. Are you saying that there's an army coming towards us? The young man nodded and said with a pale face, "It's an army. There are at least 1,000 of them, and all of them are cavalrymen. I saw them from afar in front of the city gates just now. It was a large group of people. These people are coming straight for our Danfu County. Could it be? Quelling civil unrest and punishing rebels." These words flashed through everyone's minds, causing the three patriarchs and elders to turn pale with fright. It's over. We accidentally injured Wang Yi, and we can't find out which bastard did it. Yesterday, we even besieged the Yamen. Now that things have gotten out of hand, I'm afraid there's no way for us to explain ourselves. The Imperial Court has sent troops to suppress us. Send troops to suppress. Suppress? How? The young man stuttered in fright. How else can they suppress us? What does the Imperial Court do to rebels? Everyone was so scared that their faces drained of color. From the looks of it, the Imperial Court had sent troops so quickly because they were here to exterminate them. Every injustice has its perpetrator, and every debt has its debtor. We weren't the ones who did this. We weren't the ones who stabbed Wang Yi. The young man couldn't hold it in any longer. We've already agreed from the start that we're here to ask His Highness to write a letter of guarantee for us. We're not here to assassinate His Highness. Which bastard did such a thing? Isn't he trying to kill everyone in our town? Shouting and wrangling won't solve all the problems. The key is how to quell Wang Yi's anger. But we don't even know how Wang Yi is doing right now. Everyone was in a mess. Even the family heads and elders were just ordinary citizens. Since ancient times, citizens had never fought with officials. This time, they were forced into a corner and had no other choice. That was why they came up with the idea of writing a letter of guarantee. They also thought that if everyone in the county gathered together, they would not believe that Wang Yi would not agree. However, while there were advantages to having more people, there were also disadvantages. Gathering people to petition and gathering people to rebel were two completely different things. Everyone panicked and arranged for the younger generation of each family to scout the situation outside the city. After the time it took to brew a cup of tea, another junior ran back breathlessly. Clan leader, those soldiers have been stopped by the people in Wang Yi's tent. At this moment, those people have stopped outside the city and have no intention of approaching for the time being. Could it be that these people are discussing attacking our county? It's hard to say. Magistrate Qing is still kneeling outside Wang Yi's campsite. Maybe that's true. Then what should we do? If they really attack us, how can we be a match for the soldiers? I heard that the people who came this time are from the 5 barracks. These people are usually guarding the capital and are your Majesty's most capable subordinates. This time, it's really. The few of them could not finish their words. However, the citizens could not get close to the city even if they wanted to hear the news. Therefore, they did not know the details of what was happening outside the camp. The Eastern Army commander who led the Eastern Army of the 5 barracks here was once Pang Zhao's subordinate. He was 32 years old and his surname was Ma Qing. He had an exceptionally fiery and forthright personality. Ma Qing led the Eastern Army's 3,000 cavalrymen to the outskirts of Danfu County. They immediately wanted to take down Danfu County with an overwhelming advantage. However, they were stopped by Xiaoyu and Su Weiji in time. Su Weiji and Xiaoyu were Pang Zhao's strategists. Ma Qing had worked with Pang Zhao before and had naturally met him many times. Now that he saw the two of them, Ma Qing naturally would not neglect them. They smiled and greeted each other. Mr. Su, Mr. Xia, as soon as this general heard the prince's request for help, I immediately selected 3,000 soldiers and horses and traveled day and night to quell the rebellion. I also left a letter asking someone to report the matter to His Majesty on my behalf. Ma Qing pointed in the direction of Danfu County's city gate. With a heavy voice he asked, "Is there a rebellion in this city?" Xiaoyu secretly cursed Tao Hanshan for causing trouble, but he could not show it on his face. He said solemnly, "Thank you for coming here in time. Brothers, you have worked hard. I don't dare. What's the situation in the city now? Where is Wang Yi?" Ma Qing admired and respected Pang Zhao very much. At this time, he did not see Pang Zhao come out, so he was somewhat worried. Su Weiji smiled bitterly and said, "You may not know, Commander, but the matter in the city is not a rebellion. It is not simple and cannot be explained in a few words. Wang Yi is seriously injured. He has taken the medicine prescribed by the doctor and is sleeping soundly. Wang Yi is injured." Ma Qing was shocked. Wang Yi is such a powerful person, yet he is injured. What kind of powerful person dares to do this? I want to meet him. No, Commander, you misunderstand. Xiaoyu sighed. This matter is really complicated. To put it simply, when Huichuan County was building the Imperial Mausoleum, the people of Danfu County were recruited. However, after these people left, less than 1 in 10 were left. Countless people died of exhaustion and starvation. Su Weiji also sighed with pity and continued, because of what happened in the past, the families in Danfu County were extremely afraid of the construction of the Imperial Mausoleum. They did not dare to send able-bodied men, so the people did not go to Huichuan County to report. In order to investigate the matter, Wang Yi rushed here. When the people knew that there was a way to redress the injustice, they immediately surrounded Wang Yi's residence. Yes, the people petitioned and begged Wang Yi to write a letter of guarantee that he would not recruit the people of Danfu County to build the Imperial Mausoleum in the future. However, Wang Yi was ordered to supervise the construction of the Imperial Mausoleum. It was difficult for him to make such a decision in such a short time. When he was surrounded and arguing, he was stabbed by a sickle. Xia Yu and Su Weiji complimented each other and explained the whole story clearly. The helplessness of the people was also expressed incisively and vividly. They did not want to give others the chance to misunderstand that the people of Danfu County wanted to rebel. When Ma Qing heard this, his brows furrowed into knots. But that's not what His Highness said when he asked for help. This general has brought 3,000 cavalrymen here in order to end the battle quickly and resolve the rebellion here. It's not like that. Xia Yu waved her hand and said helplessly and apologetically, at that time, the situation was urgent and we were surrounded. We did not know what to do for a moment, so we asked our subordinates to find some time to write a letter asking for help. The words in the letter were not clear and caused such a big misunderstanding. It's really a sin. Although Ma Cheng looked like a boorish man, he naturally had his own meticulous way of doing things. He would not believe that someone wrote a wrong letter asking for help and did not express it clearly. There must be a secret behind this. However, Ma Cheng was a smart person. He knew that there were some things that he should not know, so he should not ask too much. If he asked too much, he would easily get into trouble. Chapter 1028. Xia Yu and Su Weiji naturally knew that Ma Qing was right and nodded in tacit understanding. It's only right for the governor to report to your majesty. Things like mobilizing troops and horses are complicated. The governor is devoted to the country and rushed over as soon as he heard that there was trouble. This is a sincere heart. Your majesty will definitely understand. Yes, the governor is righteous. This old man really admires him. Xia Yu and Su Weiji echoed each other and praised Ma Qing. Ma Cheng was a red-faced man. When he heard this, he waved his hand and said with a smile, "This is my duty." Even though he had been rashly transferred here, and there was a risk that he would be accused of using troops without authorization, but he knew Pang Zhao's character and sense of responsibility. Moreover, there was a reason for this matter. He believed that this misunderstanding would be resolved after he reported it to the emperor. Therefore, Ma Qing didn't show too much emotion. He only ordered the 3,000 troops to set up camp nearby while he followed Xia Yu and Su Weiji into the camp to rest for a while. He could draft a memorial to the emperor first or pay a visit to Wang Yi later. Magistrate Qing had been kneeling not far away. He saw and heard everything clearly. He couldn't help but be surprised when he saw that Wang Yi still sent his counselor to explain the situation to the troops despite the heavy reward. He didn't seem to have any intention of venting his anger on the people of Danfu County. He didn't expect that such a famous person on the battlefield would have such a benevolent side. Such a person was truly worthy of respect. Percent in the imperial palace in the capital. In the imperial study, Li Qitian was wearing a tea-colored wide-sleeved robe. He wore a purple gold crown on his head and a golden jade belt around his waist. He was pacing back and forth in front of a desk covered with a bright yellow tablecloth. The red carpet on the ground was soft and thick, so Li Qitian's every step was silent. Even though his steps were a bit heavier due to his anxiety and anger, they still didn't make the slightest sound. Ji Ziyu was wearing a bright red brocade robe with arrow sleeves. His fair and handsome face was expressionless. His back was as straight as a javelin. He lowered his eyes and looked at the embroidery on the bright yellow tablecloth without saying a word. This Pang Zhishi, no matter where she goes, she doesn't plan on letting us live in peace. Why did he secretly mobilize his troops? That Ma Cheng must have eaten a bear's heart and leopard's guts. Without my permission, he actually dared to leave immediately. Could it be that the Yun guy wants to rebel? A dark look flashed across Ji Ziyu's bright eyes, but he managed to conceal it perfectly. Your Majesty, please calm down. Perhaps things aren't as they seem. No. Li Qitian's nostrils flared. He took a few deep breaths before he gnashed his teeth and said, if he didn't have the intention to rebel, why would I do this? We also know that it was only because the time wasn't ripe that he didn't make a move. Now that something like this has happened, do you still want us to remain indifferent? We never fight an unprepared battle, Ji Lan. Your subject is here. If you are really ordered to lead the 3,000 battalions, the 5 armies, and the Divine Strategy Battalion to quell the chaos, how confident are you? Ji Ziyu said expressionlessly, Your Majesty, Prince Zhong Xuanqi has at most 3,000 troops. We can also mobilize the Tiger Army and the Dragon Stallion Army to help you. I only want to ask you, how confident are you in defeating Pang Zhishi with numbers? Li Qitian's expression was too serious. Ji Ziyu knew that he was serious this time. Whether it went well or not, Ji Ziyu's heart spun countless times. Emotionally, it was one thing. Rationally, it was another thing. For the sake of long-term planning, he couldn't make a scene with Li Qitian face to face. Replying to Your Majesty, if it was someone else, I can say that I have elites in my hands. Since we have numbers, I am 99% confident. However, if the opponent is Prince Zhongshuan, I am only 50% confident. Pang Zhishi and I are evenly matched. You. Li Qitian was anxious and angry. He couldn't help but raise his voice. Even if I give you several times more troops than him, you still don't dare to say that you are confident in defeating the entire province. Your Majesty, I cannot lie to you. On the battlefield, it has always been resourceful to fight with fewer troops. Pang Zhishi is a godly commander and good at using tricks. Your Majesty already knows that. I can guarantee you that I can defeat anyone, but against Pang Zhishi, I am not confident. Therefore, Pang Shao was a difficult opponent to deal with. When Li Qitian heard Ji Ziyu's objective analysis, he was so anxious that he almost shed a few tears. As the emperor, he had sacrificed a lot for the country. He was truly worried sick. But how many of the officials in the court could truly understand him? Pang Zhishi had a good reputation now. There were also many rumors among the common people about how he, the emperor, had abandoned the bow after the birds were gone. It was as if Pang Zhishi had suffered a great grievance. How could he not be worried when the people's voices were so loud? However, Pang Zhishi didn't know how to behave himself. He had disappeared from Wanfo Temple for many days. No one knew what he had done in private. Now, he had secretly mobilized the cavalry of the 5 military camps. He didn't even have a tiger tally, but he had arranged for the troops to leave with just one sentence. To Li Qitian, this was more unbearable than a slap to the face. As a subject, Pang Shao didn't know how to avoid arousing suspicion. Could he be blamed for worrying too much? However, that guy was so good at using troops. Ji Ziyu was also a talented general, but he didn't dare to make any guarantees in front of Pang Zhishi. He couldn't defeat Pang Zhishi head-on. If he wanted to protect himself, he had to find other ways. Li Qitian gritted his teeth. After a long time, he said, "Perhaps this battle is unavoidable. When the time comes, I will have to rely on you to protect the country." "Alon, I'm afraid I will have to rely on you." Ji Ziyu lowered his eyes. There was no emotion on his handsome face. Li Qitian was already used to Ji Ziyu's calm appearance. He said faintly, "The three of us brothers didn't expect things to turn out like this. However, I'm already riding a tiger and can't get off. Alon, you should understand me, right?" Ji Ziyu lowered his head and cupped his hands. He said, "This subject understands." Li Qitian nodded in relief. Just as he was about to speak, a high-pitched and slightly shrill voice came from outside the hall. "Your Majesty, there is an urgent report from Danfu County." "Bring it up." Li Qitian's expression changed. He walked around the table and sat down on the dragon chair. Grand Eunuch Xiong Jinxue walked in quickly with the letter in his hands. He bowed and walked over quickly to present it. Li Qitian hurriedly opened the letter. After reading it carefully, he raised his eyebrows in surprise. Xiong Jinxue had already gone to stand in a corner. It was as if he had become one with the decorations of the imperial study. Ji Ziyu was surprised by Li Qitian's expression. Li Qitian threw the letter in front of Ji Ziyu. "Take a look. This subject obeys." Ji Ziyu cupped his hands in acknowledgement. He bent down to pick up the letter that had fallen to the ground. He opened it and read it carefully. Then, he said calmly, "It's not a rebellion. This is a good thing." Li Qitian raised his eyebrows. "You believe it just like that?" Ji Ziyu said, "Ma Cheng is an honest and upright person. This information should be true." His words were quite artistic. Although he was trying to exonerate Pang Xiao, he didn't directly talk about Pang Xiao's character. Instead, he talked about the honest and upright Ma Cheng. Li Qitian was, after all, the founding emperor of the empire. He had experienced many battles, big and small. He had some understanding of the generals in the imperial court. When he heard this, he thought of Ma Cheng, that boorish fellow. He couldn't help but feel relieved. However, he had been so terrified just now because he was frightened by the possibility of Pang Zhao's rebellion. When Ji Ziyu saw his ugly behavior, Li Qitian felt that he had lost face. Chapter 1029. Ji Ziyu remained expressionless when he heard this. He only looked down at his black boots and didn't express any opinion about Your Majesty's words. It was as if he hadn't seen Li Qitian's flustered appearance just now. Li Qitian naturally knew Ji Ziyu's temperament. He had always treated people coldly. Even though he was loyal and devoted to the imperial court, it was still not easy to hear some pleasing words from him. His silence meant that he didn't care about this matter at all. Although Li Qitian didn't want others to see him like that, Ji Ziyu's silent appearance was truly displeasing. Li Qitian took a deep breath to calm himself down. Only then did he remember what Ma Cheng had mentioned in his letter. His mood, which had just calmed down, was once again tensed up with anger. Since it's not a rebellion, from what Ma Cheng said, the people of Danfu County seem to have suffered a great injustice. Li Qitian coldly hooked the corners of his lips. They're building our future mausoleum. They actually went to Peng Zhishi to petition. They really know how to choose people. Ji Ziyu frowned when he heard Li Qitian's words. These words didn't sound important, but they clearly expressed Your Majesty's displeasure. He was already displeased that the people weren't willing to peacefully build the mausoleum. These people actually went to Pang Xiao to petition. This made him even more displeased. Clearly, Li Qitian had forgotten that Pang Zhao's position of premier supervisor of the construction of the mausoleum was conferred by him. Since the main official in charge of supervising the construction of the mausoleum was present, why would the people come to the capital to petition? However, Li Qitian didn't like Pang Xiao. Naturally, Pang Xiao couldn't do or say anything. Ji Ziyu wanted to defend Pang Xiao, but after thinking about it, he swallowed his words. He didn't want to arouse more suspicion from Li Qitian. Ji Ziyu fell silent again. After a long time, he said, "Your Majesty still has to consider the people's petition." When Li Qitian saw Ji Ziyu acting like this, he felt rather bored. Sometimes, these wooden-headed officials were even worse than Xiong Jinshui, who served him by his side. His words made him feel comfortable. This was also why the emperor would have some complicated feelings towards the eunuchs who served him. At least, after being together for a long time, it was normal for them to be closer. Li Qitian said in a deep voice, "Of course, I will consider it. It's just that the unruly people are causing trouble. They dare to make all sorts of excuses about the construction of my imperial mausoleum. There are many people from all over Dezhou. Do they think that my imperial mausoleum can't be built without them?" Speaking of the atmosphere, Li Qitian slammed the table. "Your Majesty, please calm down." Ji Ziyu and Xiong Jinshui knelt down and bowed. Magistrate Qing had been kneeling outside the camp for an entire day, but Pang Xiao still hadn't summoned him. He knew that either Wang Ye's injuries were extremely serious, or his actions had angered Wang Yi. Even if Wang Yi woke up, Wang Yi didn't want to see him. Magistrate Qing didn't despise Pang Xiao as much as the other officials of the Lu faction. In his heart, the stability of the country was the most important. Pang Zhishi had contributed greatly to the development of the country. Moreover, he had an upright character and didn't have any intention of sacrificing the people of Danfu County. He was willing to tell the truth about the situation and didn't hide anything that went wrong during the construction of the imperial mausoleum because he wanted to take responsibility. His actions made Magistrate Qing admire him. However, he didn't know how the emperor would deal with this matter. However, it was an indisputable fact that he had schemed against someone. He couldn't make Pang Xiao completely forget about this matter. He had offended Pang Xiao, and he didn't expect Pang Xiao to forgive him. Magistrate Qing struggled to get up in the evening. He had been kneeling for a long time, and his legs felt like they were fake. Magistrate Qing stood in place for a long time before he staggered back to the county. Most of the children of the three major families in the city were ordered to look around the city gate. When they saw Magistrate Qing limping back, they hurriedly supported him and reported back to their families. The family heads of the three families and Elder Qi had been paying attention to the situation outside for a long time. They originally thought that the magistrate would be punished by Wang Yi, but they didn't expect that Wang Yi didn't do that. The magistrate actually came back safe and sound. "Sir, what's the situation now? Did the imperial court send troops here to harm the people of Danfu County?" The family head of the Yu family asked the question that everyone wanted to know. Magistrate Qing smiled. His legs hurt badly, but he was still able to talk to the people leisurely. "You saw those cavalrymen, right?" He turned around and pointed to the newly added campsite. The horses were all managed by the people of the 5 military camps. Looking from afar, the scene of the snow-white tents in the campsite was particularly spectacular under the light of the setting sun. It was as if those cavalrymen had stepped on the people's hearts before they even reached them. The people's faces were ashen. They didn't know what to do. I saw it. "Sir, what should we do now?" "That's right, sir. Back then, we brought our children to the government office to seek an explanation from Wang Yi. Didn't we listen to Sir's idea? You can't abandon us now." When they heard someone mention this, the rest of the people didn't care about their feelings anymore. They all talked at once about this matter. Magistrate Qing didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Everything he did was for the stability of Dezhou. However, the people in front of him didn't understand his actions at all. They even resented him and wanted to drag him out to take the blame. These foolish people. Magistrate Chink shook his head and said, "If I really didn't care about you, I would have left long ago. Why would I kneel here and beg for mercy?" When the people who were still discussing spiritedly heard Magistrate Chang's words, their expressions immediately turned serious. In their great fear, they had already selectively ignored some things. Now that they were reminded, they naturally knew that their complaints were unreasonable. They did listen to Magistrate Chang's idea. However, that idea was only thought of when the three family heads and elders were present. They took the initiative to ask Magistrate Ching to come up with this idea. If they didn't ask for it, Magistrate Ching, as an official of the imperial court, wouldn't have to do this. Everyone couldn't help but fall silent. When Magistrate Ching saw this, he softened his tone and said, "Don't worry. Since I'm a local official, there are some things that I know how to do. I'll write a letter to Your Majesty and state the facts. I'll ask Your Majesty to make the decision." With such a direct message, I believe that the previous emperor who founded the country will definitely not disappoint you. When the three family heads, elders, and commoners heard this, they were all overjoyed. They couldn't help but kneel and kowtow to Magistrate Ching. "Thank you, Your Majesty. Thank you, Your Majesty." With Magistrate Chang's guarantee, their chances of survival increased. If Your Majesty knew the inside story, he might empathize with their difficulties and not punish them for the crime of plotting rebellion and assassinating Wang Yi. When Magistrate Ching returned to the yamen and saw his wife and child, he didn't hesitate. He first ordered the servants to send his wife and child back to their hometown to take care of their grandmother. He bid farewell to his wife and child in tears. When he returned home, he lit a lamp and wrote a memorial. Magistrate Chang's memorial roughly described the truth of this matter. The most important thing was that he clearly expressed his wish to not build the imperial mausoleum. Magistrate Ching knew that once this memorial reached Your Majesty's hands, there was an 80% chance that he would die. However, other than fear, he was more happy that his plan had succeeded. Regardless of whether he died or not, for a normal ruler who wanted the country to be stable, he wouldn't continue to build the imperial mausoleum after such a thing happened. No matter what, he had to get over this matter first. Once they had such an idea, they would be able to use the limited amount of money they had on the upcoming natural disaster. His plan would be a complete success. Magistrate Ching was full of joy and excitedly ordered his servants to send out the memorial. Because the matter in Danfu County was very important, the memorial quickly reached Li Qitian's hands. After Li Qitian read it, he smashed all the blue and white porcelain vases in the imperial study on the spot. The eunuchs led by Xiong Jinshui were so scared that they all knelt down and kowtowed, not daring to make a sound. These useless things. And those unruly people. Each and every one of them is forcing me. I am the ruler of a country. If I build the imperial mausoleum at this age, I might not be able to build it well even after 10,000 years. How dare they make all kinds of excuses? That Danfu County magistrate didn't manage his people well and caused a lot of chaos. Instead of apologizing properly, he actually dares to ask me not to continue building the imperial mausoleum. He is simply looking down on me. Your Majesty, please calm down. Xiong Jinshui's voice was gentle and careful. On the other hand, Li Qitian was so angry that his chest heaved up and down violently. He was like a bellows that had been pressed down by someone, huffing and puffing. Li Qitian paced back and forth for a long time. Just as he was about to write the edict, someone outside the hall came in again. Your Majesty, Prince Xiongxuan's memorial. The veins on Li Qitian's forehead throbbed. After a long time, he finally calmed down and read Pang Zhao's so-called memorial. The memorial was even more detailed than what Magistrate Cheng had written. It also clearly described the tragic situation in Danfu County where less than 10% of the people survived. It also explained that this time, it was pardonable. Your Majesty, for the sake of the stability of the country, must not punish the people. Li Qitian sneered. Pang Zhishi was still the same. Could it be that as the emperor, he didn't know how to treat the people well? Could he personally take the lives of the common people? Was he trying to show that he, Pang Zhishi, had a heart of compassion for the people? Li Qitian turned around and wrote the edict. He ordered someone to quickly send it to Danfu County. On the third day of Pang Zhao's serious injury, the eunuch by the emperor's side brought Your Majesty's edict to Danfu County. These days, the people of Danfu County lived in an abyss of suffering. They couldn't eat or sleep well. They were constantly on tenterhooks. They were afraid that the imperial court would give the order in the blink of an eye for the cavalry stationed outside the city to charge in. At that time, how could they resist? Panic made the air thick. The people were so desperate that they didn't dare to go out. Even the rows of shops on the streets were closed. The city was desolate. There were also people who trusted Magistrate Qing. They felt that the magistrate would definitely plead for them. Chapter 1030. Ah. If that's the case, how can we survive? Everyone immediately panicked. Some of the more timid ones even covered their faces and cried on the spot. How did things turn out like this? At that time, we listened to County Magistrate Chang's suggestion and went to the prince to petition. But Magistrate Chang has already pleaded for us. Now that such a big thing has happened in the city, Magistrate Chang can't even protect himself. How can he take care of us? Which son of a bitch injured His Highness? Catch this person and hand him over. Maybe we can escape this disaster. It was so chaotic at that time. No one saw who it was. Let's look for him. Maybe he was the closest to Wang Yi at that time. Alas! Who is it? Come out and admit it yourself. Don't wait for others to find out. The commoners were in a mess. Before they could do anything, they had already started to fight among themselves. They were really panicking, especially the commoners who went to participate in the petition but didn't get close to the inside. They felt more and more that they didn't want to. A woman heard the commotion and gathered around. She cried, "We women and children didn't go to the petition that day. Will we be implicated? Do you think this is a small matter? Besieging the yamen and injuring the only king with a different surname. If your Majesty thinks we are rebelling, tell me, is this a big or small crime? I'm afraid our whole family will be beheaded." Ah. No. Why not? If we are all beheaded, the blood won't be washed away even if the river pours in. This statement was too frightening. All the commoners felt a chill run down their spines. The women cried even louder in fear. The men were so frightened that their hands and feet turned cold. Let's go back and pack up. We'll immediately escape with our families. Yes, let's escape quickly. Some people turned around and wanted to go home to pack up their belongings. However, the few elders who had been silent for a long time said, "It's useless. If it's really a crime of rebellion, it's useless even if you escape to the ends of the world. When your Majesty sends people to catch you, can you escape for the rest of your lives?" These venerable elders were all people of virtue and prestige. They were quite dignified in front of everyone. Hearing his words, everyone fell into despair. No, we're innocent. We have to reason with County Magistrate Qing. The County Magistrate originally gave us the idea, but now His Majesty may want all of our lives. Is the County Magistrate not taking responsibility for this? Does he think he can dismiss us with a simple plea? In desperation, some people immediately agreed. Someone whispered, "Who knows if he's begging for mercy or not? Maybe he's begging for mercy for himself." "The county magistrate's wife and children haven't appeared for a long time. My third daughter-in-law's eldest niece's younger sister-in-law said that there aren't many people left in the yamen. The county magistrate's wife has long left." "What?" Sure enough, he was able to keep his composure and ran away with his wife and child. "He wants us to be the scapegoat. Let's go and find him." "Yes, let's go find him." In desperation, the commoners gathered at the yamen just like they did when they petitioned Pang Shao. Knowing that they were here to seek an explanation from County Magistrate Ching, more and more people joined the crowd. Not long after, the yamen's entrance was completely surrounded. Compared to the previous time, the citizens did not have any weapons in their hands, but their resentment was clearly heavier than the previous time. County Magistrate Ching heard the news and hurried to the door. Seeing a large group of people surrounding him in front of the door, he could not help but frown. "What's the meaning of this?" "Sir, it's been so many days. Is there any news from your Majesty? We've been on tenterhooks all day. We can't eat or sleep. We're just waiting for orders from our superiors." "Sir, didn't you say that you're pleading for mercy for us? Why hasn't your Majesty issued a decree to pardon us?" Looking at the anxious and resentful faces, Magistrate Ching felt a sense of helplessness from the bottom of his heart. These were the commoners. They only thought about their own gains and losses and would not consider the big picture. They were easily incited. Although they were smart, they were no match for their own selfish desires. County Magistrate Cheng's silence made all the commoners agitated. In the crowd, there were already some hot-tempered young people cursing. County Magistrate Ching felt complicated after being cursed at. He thought about the 3,000 cavalrymen that Pang Shao had stopped outside the city. It was said that Pang Shao had paid for all the food that the people and horses had eaten. Pang Shao had also been stabbed by the commoners, but he did not seek revenge. He was even willing to explain it to Governor Ma. The most important thing was that County Magistrate Ching knew that Pang Shao had already pleaded for mercy for the commoners. He was already somewhat reluctant to smear the reputation of such a righteous and considerate person behind his back. That day, in order to achieve his goal, he incited the commoners' emotions and gradually planted a seed in their hearts. He made everyone think that Prince Zhongshuan was a muddle-headed person who killed without batting an eyelid. But now, County Magistrate Ching actually felt regret. If there were 2 or 3 generals like this in the imperial court, they could keep each other in check. How could Dezhou not be able to protect its empire? But County Magistrate Ching knew that he would not be able to see such a scene in the future. He did not know if Your Majesty would listen to Pang Zhao's advice. But he knew that he would not be able to survive. Perhaps it was because people on the verge of death spoke kindly. County Magistrate Ching could not help but say, "This county has already explained the situation that day. Even if Your Majesty blames someone, he will only blame this county. He will not implicate anyone else. Also, as far as I know, Prince Zhongshuan has already explained the situation to Governor Ma of the 3,000 cavalrymen. Governor Ma and Prince Zhongshuan have also sent a letter to Your Majesty, stating that you did not plan to rebel that day. Prince Zhongshuan and Your Majesty are sworn brothers. Even if Your Majesty does not believe my words, Your Majesty will definitely believe Wang Ye's words." Everyone was extremely shocked. "Your Majesty, you said that Prince Zhongshuan also sent a letter to Your Majesty to plead on our behalf. Your Majesty, please do not lie to us." County Magistrate Ching saw the shocked expressions of the commoners and shook his head. How could this county speak nonsense about such an important matter? A commoner said in a low voice, "From the looks of it, Prince Zhongshuan is not a bad person. We did not have a good impression of him in the past and misunderstood him." Seeing that the hostility in the crowd was no longer as strong, County Magistrate Ching took 2 steps forward and slowly said, "Everyone, think about it. That day, you were misunderstood as a rebellion because you besieged the county yamen, right? Now that you are doing this, do you want to add another layer of sin?" When the commoners heard this, their hearts trembled. Wasn't that right? That day, they besieged the yamen. Now, they were besieging the yamen. Prince Zhongshuan had already explained what happened that day, but today's matter was not. If your majesty were to find out, wouldn't they be accused of rebelling again? A dignified elder shouted, "Quickly, disperse, disperse. Don't crowd around here. Yes, yes, yes. Disperse quickly. Don't cause a misunderstanding." The commoners turned around and dispersed. At this moment, a fast horse suddenly rushed over from the end of the street. Behind the fast horse were more than 10 men who were also riding horses. They looked like people from the 5th Army camp. The commoners' voices were noisy and covered the sound of the horses' hooves hitting the ground. County Magistrate Ching stood on the red steps and saw the fast horse approaching quickly. The rider on the horse was wearing an iron-gray sunflower shirt. He immediately knew that someone from the palace had come. Although County Magistrate Ching had already mentally prepared himself, when he saw someone from the palace, his heart still thumped. His heartbeat rapidly accelerated, as though it was going to jump out of his chest. Even so, County Magistrate Cheng's face was still very calm. As the sound of the horse's hooves approached, County Magistrate Ching straightened his back. The commoners also noticed the newcomer. When they saw the clothes and the bag on the person's back, they all fell silent and retreated, making way for the person in front of the yamen. The eunuch dismounted from his horse and quickly walked to the yamen. Behind him, the men from the 5 military camps dismounted from their horses as well, and formed 2 rows in an aggressive manner. The eunuch loudly shouted, "Where is Lord Ching?" Seeing this attitude, the commoners' hearts turned cold. County Magistrate Ching said unhurriedly, "This humble official is Lord Ching." The eunuch raised his eyebrows and glanced at him. He immediately took out a bright yellow imperial edict. Without giving County Magistrate Ching time to change his clothes and burn incense, he opened the imperial edict and loudly read, "Lord Ching, receive the imperial edict. This humble official receives the imperial edict." Lord Ching lifted his clothes and knelt. The men from the 5th Army camp all knelt on the ground. The commoners also knelt on the ground. The eunuch said, "By the will of the heavens, the emperor decrees, County Magistrate Ching is incompetent in governing his subordinates. He harbors evil intentions and has disloyal intentions. He is to be stripped of his official position and handed over to the Ministry of Justice's prison to be sentenced to death. His family members are to be enslaved by the officials and sold off. This is the imperial edict." There was complete silence in front of the yamen. The commoners were scared out of their wits. Your Majesty did not even interrogate County Magistrate Ching. Instead, he directly arrested him and sentenced him to death. What about them? Wouldn't they all have the same fate? When County Magistrate Ching heard the words execution, it was as if he had finally received a second shoe. Although he was afraid, he was more excited and relieved that his scheme had succeeded. This humble official obeys the imperial edict. County Magistrate Ching calmly kowtowed. The eunuch saw that he was so calm and did not appear to be panicking. He could not help but admire him. The men from the 5th Army camp swarmed forward and arrested County Magistrate Ching. Immediately after, people rushed into the yamen to arrest him. The eunuch directly ordered people to bring County Magistrate Ching into the yamen and lock him up. The commoners watched anxiously as the eunuch and the others brought County Magistrate Ching into the yamen. Then, the door of the yamen slammed shut in front of their eyes. Everyone was stunned. This County Magistrate Ching is going to be beheaded. Your Majesty is going to let us off. The commoners were all in disbelief. Immediately after, everyone heaved a sigh of relief. There were even those with shallow eye sockets who were crying tears of joy. It's all thanks to Wang Yi for not holding a grudge against us. An elderly person wiped the tears from the corners of his eyes emotionally. Wang Yi pleaded for mercy on our behalf. That's why your majesty is letting us off on his account. Wang Yi was hurt by us, but he was still willing to speak the truth. He did not take the opportunity to take revenge on us. I'm afraid we've misunderstood Prince Zhongshuan. He's clearly an upright man. The commoners in front of the yamen happily dispersed. They were anxious to go home. They went to tell their families the good news.
Chapter 1031. In the camp, Qin Yiming and Pang Shao were meeting Liao Zhibing, Meng Qin, and the others in the main tent. So, Alliance Master, you want me to go to Neon and inquire about this righteous man? Yes. Qin Yiming looked down and sighed. I know this is not an easy task. It's like finding a needle in a haystack, and we don't speak the same language. We need to leave our hometown and spend a lot of time to do this. I heard that Neon is not peaceful and is at war. This trip will be risky. If Mr. Liao finds it difficult, I can think of other ways. Liao Zhibing hurriedly shook his head. I didn't mean that. It's a good thing that the leader knows how to repay kindness. Moreover, there are many brothers in the alliance who come from all over the world. As far as I know, there are a few brothers from the southern sea who can speak simple Neon. Their characters are trustworthy. If the alliance master trusts me, then let me arrange this matter. Qin Yiming was overjoyed and said with a smile, there are indeed many talented people in the alliance. Since that's the case, I can rest assured. As she spoke, there was a hint of sadness in her expression. I always wanted to send Sakurai's ashes back to Neon. I don't think he would want to drift in a foreign country, right? This time, let the brothers take Sakurai's ashes with them to avoid trouble. If we can find his hometown, bury him and find out who else in his family needs to support. He died for me, so I have to take care of his family. The leader is right. But if we can't find him, bring him back. I will bury him. Qin Yiming lowered his head and sighed again. It's just that if we don't try hard, we will feel guilty. Liao Zhibing and Meng Qin nodded emotionally. Meng Qin said, don't worry, leader. We are all hot-blooded men in the alliance. We pay the most attention to repaying kindness with kindness and revenge with revenge. Sakurai saved the leader, so our Qingtian alliance owes him a favor. It's only right that we search for his past. Pang Shao praised, they are all hot-blooded heroes. Don't worry. This king will also arrange for reliable people to follow you on this trip to Neon. No matter what the situation is, at least your safety will be guaranteed. Liao Zhibing and Meng Qin were pleasantly surprised. They bowed to Pang Shao in unison. They now had a better understanding of the position of Alliance Master in Wang Ye's heart. Thank you, Wang Yi, for being so considerate. Pang Shao smiled and waved his hand. He looked at Qin Yiming and asked, say it again. What's his name again? It's better if it's pronounced in Japanese. Otherwise, we won't be able to find him. Sakurai's pronunciation that day was so interesting that Qin Yiming had a deep impression of it. Later, he even wrote down her name. Qin Yiming got up and went to find a brush and ink. He drew according to his memory.
After drying the ink, he handed it to Liao Zhibing and said, her name is Silly Crybaby. There was a string of Qin Yiming's pronunciation that he didn't understand. Liao Zhibing put the paper away and said seriously, don't worry, Alliance Master. I will do my best to handle this matter. This Sakurai is the benefactor of our Qingtian alliance. We won't neglect her. Qin Yiming said gratefully, thank you. Liao Zhibing and Meng Qin were embarrassed by Qin Yiming's thanks and shook their heads. Wang Yi. Tang Xiao went outside the tent. Liao Zhibing and Meng Qin knew that Pang Xiao had something to do, so they hurriedly took their leave. Qin Yining personally sent them off and said, "When you arrive in Japan, you must prioritize your own safety. Take these banknotes with you and use them for your expenses along the way. When you find the people you need, come and tell me. At that time, Wang Yi will also send the people he arranged to you. At that time, we will discuss countermeasures together." "Yes, Alliance Master. Don't worry." Liao Zhibing put away the banknotes and bowed to Meng Qin again. Qin Yining watched them leave before returning to the tent. He heard Tang Xiao say, "So those commoners almost besieged the yamen again." But later, Magistrate Qing explained what happened that day and told the commoners that Wang Yi had already asked for your Majesty's help. The commoners were just about to leave after being persuaded by Magistrate Qing when the eunuch from the palace arrived. "Your Majesty sentenced Magistrate Qing to be beheaded after autumn, but the commoners didn't mention it. Is it true?" "Of course. Our people saw it with their own eyes. Wang Yi, don't worry. At that time, the situation was chaotic. Our brothers mixed in with the crowd and didn't get discovered." When Magistrate Qing received the decree, he looked very calm. Qin Yining walked to Pang Zhao's side and sat down. Magistrate Qing should be able to accept reality calmly. He might even be a bit happy. After all, things have been developing according to his plan. But I'm very surprised that he was willing to speak up for you. Pang Zhao's expression was somewhat heavy. Although Magistrate Cheng's methods were extreme and he would do anything to succeed, his starting point was for Dezhou. Compared to those who framed others for their own interests, Magistrate Cheng was much more noble. Although the treasure was now hidden in the materials used to build the imperial mausoleum, his views had changed. He wanted the treasure. The treasure was very important to him. But as Qin Yining said, there would always be something more important in this world than money. Magistrate Qing was willing to give up his life for something more important. Pang Xiao approved of his actions. After a long time, Pang Xiao said, "Perhaps, he can understand my actions." Qin Yining lowered his eyes and nodded in agreement. Unfortunately, they were on different sides from the start. Now that the imperial decree had been issued, there was no other way to save him. Pang Xiao continued to say that he was seriously injured. Ma Qing returned to the capital with 3,000 soldiers under the imperial decree and came to say goodbye. Pang Xiao even met him weekly. When the 3,000 soldiers from the 5 military camps escorted Magistrate Qing away, the citizens who had been watching in the city finally relaxed. The citizens who had gathered together that day to threaten Pang Xiao with weapons like sickles and hoes were now discussing how to invite Pang Xiao into the city. Although more than 100 of our people died that day, first, Prince Zhongshuan had nothing to do with this. Second, Prince Zhongshuan didn't mind being stabbed by us and even pleaded for mercy on our behalf. He is a benevolent and righteous person. If we let him continue to recuperate in the tent, people will say that the people of Danfu County are unreasonable. Yes, but if we invite Wang Yi into the city to recuperate, Wang Yi might not be willing to come, right? After all, we once surrounded the yamen. What if Wang Yi is worried that we have bad intentions? What should we do? Wang Yi originally came from Huichuan. Is he going back to Huichuan now? Then what about us commoners? All the citizens fell into a difficult situation. Before the citizens could even think of a solution, Li Qitian's imperial decree arrived again. However, this time, it was directly sent to Lu Heng, who was still in Huichuan County. Pang Xiao only arranged for a eunuch to pass on the decree. Chapter 1032. Pang Xiao and Qin Yining's expressions changed drastically. They never would have thought that Li Qitian would be so obsessed with building the imperial mausoleum. Originally, after such a big commotion, no matter who was sitting in Li Qitian's position, they would temporarily stop. Even if they wanted to continue building the imperial mausoleum, they would have to wait for the current situation to pass and for the common people to completely forget about this matter. However, Li Qitian had directly given the governor's job to Lu Heng. The common people now knew that the heavy rain in the south had caused no harvest. Although many places in Dezhou had granaries that could be used to provide relief at critical times, those grains were simply a drop in the bucket for the hungry mouths of the world. Qin Yining, who was currently ordering Master Zhong to provide relief in the south, had the most right to speak about how much money was needed to feed the common people. After sending away the eunuch who had passed on the message, Qin Yining couldn't help but say, if the rain doesn't stop and we can't let the common people be self-sufficient, I'm afraid that all of my family's property will be used up in one go. The imperial court's rice relief hasn't arrived yet, and your majesty doesn't keep the money for disaster relief. Instead, he insists on building the imperial mausoleum. Does he care about what happens after his death and doesn't care about his reputation at all? Pang Zhao's sword-like eyebrows were tightly knitted together. His handsome face was already filled with anger. Such behavior is truly despicable. Right now, he doesn't even bother to appease the common people. He only cares about himself. Does he think that he doesn't need to consider the common people's feelings just because he's firmly in his position? Right now, the common people's feelings are secondary. The most important thing is what to do once the natural disaster arrives. Right now, there's already such a trend. Your Majesty can't be completely ignorant, right? Pang Zhao thought about Li Qitian's personality and actions. He leaned against the chair boldly and tilted his head back. He said helplessly, Your Majesty is probably hoping for a fluke. After all, Jiangnan is the land of fish and rice. It's a rich and populous land. But, after all these years of war, even if it is a land of fish and rice, it has almost been destroyed. A few years ago, the drought in Great Yan had claimed the lives of many people. Later on, there was an earthquake. Now, there is a heavy rain, and famine has taken shape. Sooner or later, there will be a greater disaster. How does your Majesty plan to deal with it? Without money, there's no rice. What will the common people eat? Pang Zhao couldn't answer to this question. Because he couldn't think of a solution at the moment, and he couldn't understand why Li Qitian would be so ruthless. I thought that County Magistrate Qing had sacrificed his life to set up this trap, so he could at least die a worthy death. Now, it's like drawing water with a bamboo basket. He couldn't think to Pangsis. There were many things in this world that could not be calculated too carefully. Was Magistrate Cheng's plan perfect? But His Majesty didn't play by the rules. Wasn't that philanthropist Wang's plan to take revenge on Danfu County perfect? But he worked so hard, and in the end, he only used Sakurai to kill people. In the end, he even killed Sakurai. It was as if the heavens had already decided, and it wasn't up to anyone. After Lu Heng received the decree, he naturally focused on finding a way to transport the treasure. Lu Wenru was a bit worried. Seeing that Lu Heng's focus was all on the treasure, he couldn't help but remind him when Lu Heng was in a good mood. Count, with your Majesty's decree, will there be no more money left for disaster relief in the future? Lu Heng looked at Lu Wenru in surprise. He raised one of his eyebrows with a half-smile and took a sip of the white porcelain teacup. Lu Wenru's heart instantly jumped. He hurriedly bowed. Count, please forgive me. I've overstepped. Lu Heng smiled and took another sip of tea. He put down the teacup with a thud. You've been with me for a long time. It's normal for you to ask about what I do. It's not a crime. Your Majesty naturally has his reasons for doing things. I think your Majesty already knows about the situation in the south and must have made preparations. Dian is a rich and populous place. Even in the face of natural disasters, they should still be able to raise surplus food. Lu Wenru hurriedly replied respectfully, Count is right. But he didn't think so in his heart. It was true that Great Yen was a land of affluence. But why didn't they think about how many years had Great Yan's foolish demon empress been harming the common people when she was in power? Later, there were endless wars. Natural disasters and man-made disasters had already emptied the rich and populous place. Now, the flood in the south was much more serious than the north, but the imperial court didn't make any big moves. As the saying goes, after a long drought, there will be a great flood. After a long drought, famine and plague would wreak havoc, right? But the imperial court was peaceful now. The court officials had their own factions secretly competing with each other. Your Majesty didn't seem to care much about the country. Instead, he was busy dealing with the meritorious officials and building the mausoleum. When Lu Wenru thought of this, he couldn't help but sigh. However, his words carried little weight. It was already inappropriate for him to say more. Now, he didn't dare to say anything more. Lu Heng didn't care about Lu Wenru's thoughts. In his opinion, the large Dezhou dynasty was still able to deal with a natural disaster. Even if there was a natural disaster, Your Majesty would naturally make the arrangements. Why should he worry about it? If he had the time to worry about others, he would probably be killed several times over. Now, the time was ripe. That boorish man's men weren't around. He had the final say in the entire Huichuan. The construction of the imperial mausoleum was done by him alone. He could do whatever he wanted. If he missed such an excellent opportunity, there wouldn't be another one in the future. When Lu Heng thought of this, he made up his mind. He sorted out the recent plans in his heart and ordered Lu Wenru to grind them. He wrote a memorial and ordered someone to send it to the capital as quickly as possible. A few days later, the people that Liao Zhibing had arranged to go to a nation were all arranged. Pang Shao immediately chose a few quick-witted Jinghu Wei with excellent martial arts skills to accompany them. Qin Yining wiped the white porcelain urn clean and carefully wrapped it in a silk cloth. Then, he placed it in a wooden box. He carefully sealed the gaps with soft cloth before wrapping the wooden box with a wrapper. She didn't ask anyone else to do all this. Pang Shao, Ji Yun, and the others just watched silently from the side. Ji Yun's injuries were better, but she still couldn't do heavy work. She still needed more than a month to fully recover. Looking at the wooden box that Qin Yining packed tightly, she couldn't help but sigh, this servant doesn't know if I should be angry at him for stabbing us. Jing Zhe and the others fought the most fiercely that day. Their injuries were even more serious than Ji Yun's. The only one who came out unscathed was Xiao Shui. Xiao Shui lost track of Sakurai that day and was led to another path by the traces that Sakurai deliberately left behind. When she returned, Qin Yining had already been taken away. Originally, he was also angered by Sakurai, but now, he felt as complicated as Ji Yun. In the end, he said, no matter what, we should still thank him. Ji Yun also nodded in agreement. Qin Yining solemnly handed the package to Liao Zhibing, Mr. Liao, please. Liao Zhibing said, Princess, please don't worry. I will definitely take care of this matter. A group of people sent Liao Zhibing and the others out of the camp. Qin Yining watched them leave before sighing faintly. Pang Shao held her shoulder and said, let's go back. Chapter 1033. Pang Shao had a complicated expression on his face. I don't think they'll cause any trouble. According to the news that my men have gathered in the city, the people seem to be thinking about how to get me into the city to recuperate. As they spoke, they returned to the tent. Qin Yining sat down on the cross-legged table and looked up at Pang Shao. It must be because of what Magistrate Ching said. Yes. Speaking of Magistrate Ching, Pang Xiao couldn't help but sigh. Magistrate Ching should be in prison by now, waiting to be executed after autumn. I wonder how he feels when he finds out that Your Majesty didn't stop the construction of the Imperial Mausoleum. Does he feel that everything is in vain? Qin Yining shook his head. Actually, Magistrate Ching might not want to stop the construction of the Imperial Mausoleum immediately. That day, philanthropist Wang told me that they wanted to slow down Your Majesty's construction of the Imperial Mausoleum. They originally thought that if they took you down, Your Majesty would send someone else. However, no one expected that Your Majesty would choose Lu Boi to take over this position. Lu Hing definitely won't give up on the treasure. I'm afraid that Magistrate Chang's plan will fail. That's something that can't be helped. Pang Xiao sent people to pay close attention to the movements in Huichuan County. He purposely avoided it to give Lu Hing time and space to operate freely. He wanted to see what he was planning so that they could come up with a countermeasure. Therefore, Pang Xiao and Qin Yining quickly found out that Lu Heng had submitted a memorial to the emperor again. Just as Pang Xiao, Qin Yining, Xiaoyu, and Su Weiji gathered together to guess what Lu Heng was planning to do, Tang Xiu brought back the information that she had gathered. Wang Yi, Zhou Nibo reported that the previous supervisor of the Imperial Mausoleum had committed dereliction of duty and embezzlement. After careful investigation, he has confirmed that a portion of the granite used to build the Imperial Mausoleum is defective. In addition, there are many problems with the wood used for the foundation. If the construction continues like this, the Imperial Mausoleum will not be sturdy enough and will not last long. Pang Xiao smiled. So, what did Your Majesty say? Your Majesty has approved Zhou Nibo's request to purchase stone again, and has sent people to withdraw money from the state treasury. As for the original unqualified granite annades, they were all handed over to Lu Boi. Your Majesty also ordered the arrest of the former supervisor's wife and son, who have fled to the countryside. As for how they will be dealt with, although it was not explicitly stated, it will not be good. Everyone fell silent. Qin Yining originally thought that Magistrate Ching had sacrificed himself to see if Li Qitian would fall into his trap. It was only a matter of time before things developed according to Magistrate Chang's plan. However, Your Majesty's decree was truly beyond his expectations. It was as if he no longer cared about his own reputation. Now, he has no intention of stopping the construction of the Imperial Mausoleum. He even allowed the unqualified stones and wood to be disposed of and replaced. Your Majesty is the Son of Heaven. Even if he was born with a humble background, he has already tasted the taste of glory, splendor, and wealth. He feels that everything in the world should belong to him. He has long forgotten why he started the rebellion. For the sake of the Imperial Mausoleum, he once again used the state treasury. This was completely different from what Magistrate Ching had originally envisioned. When Qin Yining thought of Magistrate Ching, his heart softened and he sighed. He muttered, "This reality is truly unbearable." When Pang Xiao and Xiaoyu heard this, they all sighed together. Percent in the evening, the afterglow of the setting sun had already scattered into the horizon. The last trace of red shyly hid behind the mountains. On the pitch-black walls of the Ministry of Justice's prison, the afterglow of the setting sun had also gradually faded away. All that was left in the prison was pitch-black silence. The air was filled with a heavy aura of death. All of the prisoners here were waiting to be executed after autumn. Magistrate Ching was in a prison uniform. His hair was disheveled, and he was locked in a single cell. Like the other prisoners, he was listening to the squeaking of rats. Suddenly, the sound of rattling iron chains came from the end of the pitch-black corridor. Then, there was the sound of hurried footsteps approaching. As the light faded, two figures on the pitch-black mottled wall came closer and closer. The candlelight flickered. The jailer inserted a white lantern into the window and said in a deep voice, "Magistrate Ching, there is a visitor." Magistrate Ching lifted his eyelids and looked outside the prison. He saw a familiar person stuffing a piece of silver covered in frost into the jailer's hand. The jailer shook the silver and said, "Hurry up." Then he turned and left. "Haolin, you're here." The visitor was Magistrate Chang's trusted advisor, Lu Haolin. Lu Haolin walked to the door of the prison and gripped the wooden bars with both hands. He looked at the person in the prison with tears in his eyes. "Magistrate. Show. How can I be called a magistrate now?" Magistrate Ching smiled and slowly walked to the door. Lu Haolin looked ashamed. "Magistrate, I'm ashamed that I didn't accompany you to the end that day." "Don't mention this. It's normal for you to go that day. Is it right for you to accompany me in death?" Magistrate Chang's smile was bitter. "What's the situation outside?" "My family members." Lu Haolin wiped away his tears and shook his head while choking with sobs. County Magistrate Ching understood everything. "Your Majesty had decreed that the Ching family wouldn't have a good ending. When the nest is overturned, no egg can remain intact." Even if he had made the most comprehensive preparations in advance, he was afraid that his family would be wiped out in the end. Magistrate Ching closed his eyes and raised his head. The corners of his lips curled up as he said in a deep voice, "Good. Good. I have a clear conscience. I did all this for the sake of Dezhou's stability. My family members will naturally be on my side. When we meet the King of Hell in the future, I will have something to say. As long as the Imperial Mausoleum is closed and the money is saved, we will be able to support ourselves when the time comes. With this, Dezhou will definitely be stable. My Qing family will die a worthy death." When Lu Haolin heard this, he didn't know what to say. After a long time, he lowered his head hesitantly. Since he was going to die soon, it was better not to let him know about some things. This way, Magistrate Ching could confidently wait for the execution after autumn. At least he would feel that everything was worth it. However, although Lu Haolin didn't say anything, Magistrate Ching could clearly see his expression under the dim light of the lantern. After following him for so many years, how could Magistrate Ching not be able to discern the expression of a capable subordinate? "Haolin." Magistrate Chang's expression was stiff. The smile on his lips was somewhat ugly. He reached out his right hand and grabbed Lu Haolin's shoulder. "What happened outside?" Lu Haolin forced a smile. "What happened?" Don't try to deceive me. You and I have been friends for so many years. Do you think I can't tell whether you are telling the truth or not?" When Lu Haolin heard this, he froze. Seeing Lu Haolin's reaction, Magistrate Chang's relaxed smile disappeared. He couldn't help but tighten his grip. "Tell me, what happened?" Looking at Magistrate Ching, Lu Haolin choked with sobs. "Sir, your plan has failed. Your Majesty has ordered Zhong Yibo to be the supervisor of the Imperial Mausoleum. He has also allowed the State Treasury to use funds to purchase high-quality granite and wood. Your Majesty's Imperial Mausoleum still needs to be repaired." When Magistrate Ching heard this, he closed his eyes and slapped his forehead. He raised his head and sighed. "Are you telling the truth?" "Sir, I wouldn't lie about something like this. I know I was wrong. I should have advised you properly, but you..." When had he not advised him? It was just that Magistrate Ching was stubborn and refused to listen to his advice. Now, all his plans had failed. Magistrate Ching had not only sacrificed himself, but also his entire family. In exchange for nothing, the emperor still did not hesitate to repair the Imperial Mausoleum. As a subordinate, he also felt sorry for him. Magistrate Ching put down his hand and stared blankly at the lantern dragon opposite him. His expression was blank, as if his soul had left his body. Seeing his blank expression, Lu Haolin's heart skipped a beat. He quickly shouted, "Sir, what's wrong? Please wake up. The fatuous emperor has ruined the Dezhou dynasty." Magistrate Ching suddenly muttered these words. Lu Haolin was so scared that he wanted to rush into the prison and cover Magistrate Chang's mouth. Magistrate Chang's muscles were stiff. He kept muttering, "The fatuous emperor has ruined the Dezhou dynasty." Suddenly, he raised his eyes and glared fiercely at the stone wall. Suddenly, he used all his strength to slam into the wall. "Sir! Sir!" Lu Haolin clutched the wooden fence with both hands and sobbed silently. He watched helplessly as Magistrate Chang's head hit the ground with a red and white substance. Magistrate Chang's body fell limply onto the moldy straw, scaring the rats away. When the news of Magistrate Chang's death reached Pang Zhao's ears, he and Qin Yining had already been respectfully welcomed into the city by the people of Dongfu County. The heads of the three families had specially prepared a large two-section mansion for Pang Zhao to recuperate from his injuries. Obviously, the people of Dongfu County had completely changed their impression of Pang Zhao. Pang Zhao's magnanimity and loyalty had long been deeply rooted in the hearts of the people. Magistrate Qing committed suicide in the prison, yes. Your Majesty was furious when he found out. He thought that Magistrate Qing was dissatisfied with Your Majesty and hung him outside the city gates as a warning to the public. Pang Zhao closed his eyes and finally sighed. He pursed his lips and did not say anything. When Qin Yining found out, he was also very anxious. Although Magistrate Qing had used a scheme, he had gone a little overboard. But in the end, his intentions were still good. In the end, this was the result. It made people sigh endlessly and feel sympathy for the death of a rabbit. Pang Zhao comforted Qin Yining by taking his hand and shaking it. The two of them looked at each other. Their eyes met and they both sighed. To prevent Qin Yining from feeling sad, Pang Zhao took the initiative to change the topic. Your Majesty has kindly allowed me to recuperate here. Also, because of the incident where I was stabbed, I asked Your Majesty to allow me to increase the number of guards in the prince's mansion. My people in the court also pressured you. Your Majesty is focused on the matter of the imperial mausoleum. He probably expected that I would not have any reaction, so he has already allowed me to increase the number of guards in the prince's mansion. Your Majesty has already disregarded his dignity for the sake of the imperial mausoleum. He has to be more lenient when it comes to your matter, so as to avoid being criticized everywhere. Qin Yining rubbed the space between his eyebrows. Do you have someone in mind to increase the number of guards in the prince's mansion? I have already made arrangements. Now is the perfect opportunity for me to expand. Once something happens, there will be no shortage of manpower. Qin Yining nodded. For them, this could be considered a blessing in disguise. After living in Dongfu County, Pang Zhao's injury was also slowly recovering. Because the people of Dongfu County were grateful to Pang Zhao, everyone in the prince's mansion, including the workers who swept the courtyard, went out with more dignity than the workers of ordinary families. Although there were 3 big families in Dongfu County, the people were simple and honest when it did not affect their interests. Qin Yining and Pang Zhao's lives were exceptionally peaceful. It almost gave people the illusion that life was peaceful. Chapter 1034. The person who came was an elder. He looked to be in his 60s, but those who knew him well knew that he was an old man. This person was called LV Yun. He had lived through 3 dynasties in Beiji. The LV family was a literary family with a heritage of more than 300 years. Their children were knowledgeable and talented. However, the LV family had few children, which led to the LV family's decline. Even so, LV Yun's influence in the court was not to be underestimated. When Li Qitian first ascended the throne, he saw LV Yun as a model of Beiji's cultural heritage. In order to express his attitude, he personally visited the LV family as the emperor and had a long talk with LV Yun. Since then, it had become a much-told story. With LV Yun's background, she naturally had a good relationship with the LV family. Just like the LV family, she had a strong voice among the old officials in Beiji. Ever since Liu Heng's grandfather entered the pavilion, LV Yun became closer to the Liu family. She followed the Liu family's lead and relied on them. Now that the head of the Liu family had changed to Liu Heng, LV Yun and the Liu family were still very close. Therefore, when this elder, who everyone knew was from the LV family and had a high status, appeared in Prince Zhongshuan's house, Peng Xiao and Qin Yining were shocked. Since Duke LV came personally, he must have something to do with the Liu family. Qin Yining said worriedly, "It's not convenient for me to be present. Go out and meet him. If there's anything urgent, send someone to tell me secretly so that I can prepare in advance." Peng Xiao smiled and pinched Qin Yining's face. "No need to be so nervous. Duke LV's temperament is mild. He doesn't care about official fame and fortune. That's why he's unwilling to be an official despite having such high prestige. He might not be here to talk about official matters. There must be something else. It's precisely because we can't guess his purpose that I'm worried." Qin Yining accompanied Peng Xiao out of the main room of the inner residence. He stood in the corridor and watched Peng Xiao's back gradually disappear from his sight. Then, he sighed worriedly and turned to call Ji Yun. "Go and secretly investigate. If there's anything, immediately tell me. This servant understands." Ji Yun straightened her face and walked out quickly. Peng Xiao came to the front hall used for receiving guests. Before entering, he tidied up his clothes and entered with a smile on his face. "Lord Liu, you have come from afar. Please excuse me for not going out to meet you. This king is ashamed. Peng Xiao cupped his hands in greeting. LV Yun smiled and returned the greeting. Her actions were natural and unrestrained, and she had the elegance of a scholar. "Prince Zhongshuan, there's no need to be like this. It's this old one who took the liberty to disturb you." "Not at all. This king wouldn't be able to get a guest like you even if he begged for it. Please take a seat." Peng Xiao smiled and made an inviting gesture. LV Yun immediately waved her hand. "I'm just a commoner. How can I be so arrogant? Wang Yi, please take a seat." The two of them modestly declined, and LV Yun finally sat in the second seat. Peng Xiao ordered for good tea to be served. He asked with a smile, "Lord Liu, do you have any orders for me?" As if she didn't expect Peng Xiao to ask directly, LV Yun was stunned for a moment. Then, she stroked her long beard and smiled. Wang Yi is indeed a straightforward person. Since that's the case, this old one will get straight to the point. Please speak. LV Yun looked left and right. Then, she said in a low and serious voice, "This old one came today to ask for Wang Ye's help." "Oh." Peng Xiao raised an eyebrow, looking very puzzled. In fact, he was really puzzled. LV Yun was part of the Liu family, but she came to ask him for help. Peng Xiao suspected that this was a trap. LV Yun seemed to know what Peng Xiao was thinking. She smiled faintly and said, "Actually, with Wang Ye's sharp ears and eyes, you should have guessed what this old one wants. Wang Yi should know that your majesty has problems with the stone and would use to build the imperial mausoleum, right?" Peng Xiao smiled and nodded. "This king has heard of it. Wang Yi is recuperating in Danfu County. Perhaps he knows about the matters in the imperial court a little later. Your Majesty used granite to build the imperial mausoleum. Zhou Niba is looking for a source and has people buy it. As for the wood used to build the imperial mausoleum, someone actually suggested that Your Majesty use the wood from the abandoned warships of the previous dynasty. At this point, LV Yun's indifferent and elegant image disappeared. Her eyebrows were knitted together, and her beard was trembling in anger. During the Northern Ji period, there were a few naval battles. When the dynasty was strong, the navy subdued Goguryeo and Wanation. Later on, Northern Ji gradually declined. The treasury was empty and couldn't support the military's expenses. As a result, the navy was reduced several times. In the end, the navy was completely abandoned. Hundreds of warships of various sizes were also completely abandoned. This time, there was a lack of wood for the construction of the imperial mausoleum. Someone actually suggested that Your Majesty dismantle the warships left behind by the previous dynasty. The wood of the warships did not rot after being in the sea for more than 100 years. Moreover, it was incomparably sturdy. Your Majesty listened to someone's suggestion and actually agreed. LV Yun panted, her face full of anger. After a long while, she squeezed out a sentence. Simply ignorant. Pang Xiao heard this and understood the key point. Since LV Yun was willing to speak frankly, he did not hide it and asked directly, the person who made the suggestion should have a close relationship with Zhou Niba, right? LV Yun nodded. Prince Zhongshuan is indeed insightful. Pang Xiao smiled. With LV Gong's relationship with Zhou Niba, if the person who suggested this matter was not Zhou Niba's people, LV Gong could have discussed it with Zhou Niba and would not have looked for this king. And the shady dealings within were also very obvious. Li Qitian did not hesitate to pay any price to build the imperial mausoleum. In addition, now that the north and south were at peace, although there were natural disasters, they would pass sooner or later. The dynasty was still stable and the four seas were at peace. Li Qitian, who had won the war, would definitely be full of confidence. Even the Taitan would bow down to him. The Khan would bring people to the capital to celebrate the Empress Dowager's birthday and offer tributes. In Li Qitian's eyes, countries like Goguryeo and Wo were not worth mentioning. Therefore, he did not care whether the warships were kept or not. He still wanted to build the imperial mausoleum as soon as possible. Li Qitian might just casually say, since you want to use the warships, just dismantle as many as you use. However, with such good wood in front of them, there would definitely be many officials of the Lu faction who saw the benefits. Dismantling 10 warships and casually replying to Your Majesty was already used in the imperial mausoleum. Could Your Majesty still go and inspect it? Whose pocket would the benefits enter? Lu Heng probably did not care about the money. His eyes were fixed on the treasure. However, as a superior, when his subordinates had a way to profit, it was normal for Lu Heng to let his subordinates get some benefits. Besides, the benefits were not his. Therefore, Pang Xiao understood LV Yun's feelings very well. This elder understood the importance of the warships to Dezhou's coastal defense. He did not want the navy to completely disappear, but he could not ask for Lu Heng's help. That was why he came to look for him. LV Yun sighed and said, to be honest, these warships, let's not talk about how much effort Beiji put in. Even the craftsmanship of shipbuilding is about to be lost. This old man is worried that the warships will all be destroyed by the villain this time. If in the future, when Dezhou wants to strengthen the coastal defense, we can't find a complete warship, and we can't find a living shipbuilder among the people. What should we do? This method is too stupid. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.